Hello, welcome to the Whiskey Lodgecast. We're doing a special edition today, Sunday, August 6th, to cover a little bit more information about Scotch. Today, we're going to talk about the Scotch Regions. As always, as a little warm up to get into the stream, what have you guys been drinking today, other than whiskey? I don't know about you, but I personally have not been into any whiskey today. I try to leave myself completely blank canvas before we start stream. So I've
Um,
got coffee as usual. I just opened up a new freshly roasted bag of beans. I'll talk about that probably this coming Thursday.
I've just got, a small cup of Dr. Pepper from a local fast food chain. Uh, no ice though, because that apparently makes it unhealthy.
Quick question
Excuse
is
me?
yeah, okay.
What?
So there is a very old and very deeply flawed study that somebody did that showed that having ice in your drink somehow made it so that your body didn't absorb fluid from it as well. And so it's just been sort of a running joke that, oh, don't put ice in your great huge cup of Coca-Cola because that'll make it less healthy.
There was a
Which
very old there's a very old sort of I don't know
it,
what to quite what to call it, medical belief of some sort that cold water would kill you. It would imbalance the humors inside your body. This is probably technically because a lot of the water that people had available that happened to be cold was filled with cholera at a certain time.
yeah. I mean, I'm sorry I derailed already, but
No,
I
it's totally
reread
fine.
the debunk of that study, and it's hilarious.
It sounds
Oh,
fascinating,
I
actually.
always love a good teardown of a bad study. We should. Can you find those links?
Yeah, no,
I
I'd love to hear
will
about that.
I will try to find them again. They were something that I scrolled past on Twitter and went, "What the heck?" And
Yeah. Hey, hope you guys don't mind. I'm gonna do a little bit of self promotion before we get into the content today.
Do
As
it.
usual, usual. How did that?
Huge.
usual.
Hold on. Um, there's a very good reason that I use the studio mode for OBS because I have a tendency to screw up the previews, but luckily that
Oh,
doesn't affect the live stream at all. Yeah. Okay. Um, cool. I got that queued up. Okay, so I just went ahead and put in chat. And Spooky Chicken is going to be also giving us a link here. We're not like ready to do a Patreon or anything. But something that's been around the internet for a little while is this website called Ko-fi or Coffee or Ko-fi or however you want to say it. It's
it's pronounced somehow.
ko-fi.com. And the idea of that is basically this whole thing where like um, creators, writers, and so on will be like, hey, if you like what I do, in my sort of day job adjacent world of open source software, um, people will be like, hey, if you like what I do, consider making a donation of like consider buying me a cup of coffee. Like make a donation of $5 so I can buy a cup of coffee. Or, in our case, most likely it would be going into the whiskey fund. Um, but well, I also join stream every day with a cup of coffee, so like, coffee is very much a part of my life too. But anyway, yeah, just the idea that like if you like what we do, if you found the content enjoyable or entertaining or informative, um, go ahead and if you feel like it, and there's no obligation whatsoever to buy anything from us or give us any money. But if you feel like it, we now have links where you can go buy us a cup of coffee. And that's pretty much how we want to do this for now because we are doing this for free. Genji, welcome. I was not
Hi,
sure
Genji.
if you would be able to show up on Sunday. I'm happy to see you. It's good to have like a core audience of people who always watch. And I'll say I'm not sure if people can see um, on Twitch who are not us. I don't know if they can see how many people are watching the stream. Uh, but what's interesting is that we do awesome. Oh, hey, hello, David. Good to see you.
David.
Yeah. That's my friend who
Oh,
volunteered to
hello.
do some editing for us, potentially, which I have not yet taken him up on. I feel guilty. Also, I see that
Yes,
I see that
put
Prime
him to work,
Gaming.
Doug.
I see that Prime Gaming icon there, and I have no idea if we have any way of receiving a Prime Gaming subscription. But if you have Amazon Prime, you should know that you can, for no extra cost to you, once a month you can donate a month of a subscription to a creator, and they will get the money, and that's money that's not going into Amazon's pocket. You don't have to donate it to us. I don't know if we can even receive it, but just know that you have that available to you and use it somewhere.
I had no idea about that.
Yeah. So Amazon Prime Gaming. It's a perk of Twitch, or it's a perk of Amazon for Twitch. Yeah, because Amazon owns Twitch now, something like that.
or something.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So that's the if you feel like buying us a coffee link. Yeah, David confirms Amazon owns Twitch. Let's see. I want to go through the usual. You can find us on YouTube if you don't already know anybody who happens to pop in. Oh yeah, as I was saying, there's always extra people who I've never seen in chat. There's always people watching that we've never heard from. I think that's awesome. Like you don't need to chat with us. It's just the thing that we haven't ever heard from you. And it's cool that there's more people than like people who are actually like actively chatting with us that are actually watching the stream. So that's pretty nice. Oh yeah, and I have this view where we can make this really big. So we've got a YouTube channel. All the VODs that we do here, no matter how awful they are, unless we think we said something that would get us in trouble, which that only happened once, and we decided it wasn't a problem, so we put it up anyway. Yeah, all of our VODs go there, and then when we've got like a good topic to edit, we do a little short video. So I've got this. YouTube for some reason keeps adding a minute to the runtime of all the videos in that little preview there. So I've got like an almost 13-minute long video that it's saying is actually almost 14 minutes long, where I compared a homemade old fashioned to an on the rocks old fashioned. That was a cool thing that came out of that wasn't even the bourbon week, right? I forget even what
No, that was
the
think
summer
that was
cocktails.
the
Oh yeah, the summer cocktails.
yeah.
So that was
Okay, that was that one. Okay.
yeah, the week after dry week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Time
So
flies, man.
yeah, it does. We've been doing this for, I want to say 14 streams plus 2 weeks of vacation. So I think we've basically been 4 months in now. Does that sound right?
Wow.
We've been doing this since May.
No, it does not
You would
sound
think I
right
would
at
have
all,
gotten better
actually.
at this.
You would think that the production value would have gone up by now. Yeah, our first stream was actually April 20th, and I don't know how I forgot that.
Oh yeah, cause we did like a whole stream of nothing but labels, and
Yeah.
I kind of want to do that again, but better.
Yeah, actually, we did 2 streams. We had a stream that was
Oh,
our
yeah.
very first stream where we didn't manage to get half of it recorded, which was fine because whatever we were talking about in the first half basically wasn't the labels. And then we did a whole extra stream where we wrapped up the rest of the labels that we had there. So that's those 2, and then our third stream was for Star Wars Day. We did May the Flavor Be With You. It's a nice little throwback. So yeah, we're not great with thumbnails yet. Partly because who has time for that? Especially because like this is none of our day job. We do this for fun. And so running the stream and putting it up on YouTube just so that it exists for people who aren't in our time zone or can't watch for whatever reason, you can still watch. And then it'd be nice. We only have 12 subscribers. We have more people following our stream on Twitch than people following on YouTube, which makes sense because we stream on Twitch. Maybe people are just not finding us on YouTube yet. But on that note, if you like us, share us with your friends. Help people find us on YouTube or Twitch. You don't have to watch live. We're trying to get better about audience interaction. But most of this is conversation between friends. And that's kind of how we want it to come across. And on that note, we had a production meeting of sorts and kind of decided that this whiskey style 101 format that we were doing is not really our forte. We would rather be having casual conversations about our subjective experiences with things because we're not professional speakers or educators, really. We are people who are enthusiastic about whiskey, and if we play to that interest, stream is going to be better. The content is going to be better. So we still have the rest of our Scotch content prepared, but we're going to try to present it a slightly different way. And we're, 4 months in, we're still trying to figure out what format of content actually works for us and make adjustments to production value and stuff. And yeah, you may have noticed Spooky Chicken is with us today, but does not have a camera at the moment. Things happen. We'll get it sorted out eventually.
Somehow.
We're working on it. But hey, I've got video this week somehow.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, that's great. And you're still using the same computer. It just decided to behave today.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Um,
I don't know.
yeah.
It's
Okay. So
technology.
there's the YouTube. I've got an Instagram, which is like, I would say, since Twitter's kind of going down the toilet. I don't care if I get in trouble for saying that. according to the person who is the issue, Twitter doesn't exist anymore, and it's something else, and it's a really stupid,
Yeah.
really stupid branding decision, in my opinion. As somebody who doesn't do professional branding, but still, I'm allowed to have an opinion. So yeah, I also have a Threads associated with the Instagram. I honestly still don't spend a whole lot of time there. I spend less time on Threads than I used to spend on Twitter. I do spend relatively more time on Instagram, but Instagram has this thing where it's not all that interactive. So you can reach me. Theoretically, you can also reach me on Mastodon, but I don't have an app for that yet, and I don't know that most of the whiskey community doesn't seem to be there. Threads is okay.
Mastodon doesn't really work, like, at all. Like, if
Dang,
you
that's
can't,
crazy.
join a server that doesn't exist, or all the servers are full, it won't let you on. and
Seems
that
like
sort of
it's
thing.
working as intended. Can't join something that
Yeah.
doesn't exist, maybe. But yeah, anyway, my Instagram has a bunch of whiskey and coffee stuff on it. That's kind of my wheelhouse. I just wanted to point out once again, the Malt Runners website is still going strong, and we're doing these group reviews now. So we've coordinated a bunch of samples between the group of people who do reviews, and the idea is that we're reviewing all the same sample every week, and then we're going to have a collective review post come out. So yeah, go check that out. And this is what it's just a WordPress website, but like this is the website with we've been doing some theme stuff. So this past week the theme was American Single Malt, which is a topic near and dear to my heart, and we're going to be covering that in depth this coming Thursday, and also probably doing a few episodes on it. I've also mentioned I'm going to be appearing on another another podcast, the Embellish Pod, where I'm going to be talking about. Well, I guess I'm going to be the guest, and I'm going to talk about whatever I'm asked to talk about. But I'm hoping to talk about the regulations and how they apply to what a single malt product is in the United States. It's been we've been waiting. It's been almost a year since the publication of the proposed rules, and the TTB has still not approved it. I'm feeling a little itchy to start making some more press about American Single Malt. I don't know that it's going to actually prompt them to do anything. But
I mean, there was
yeah.
a lot of buzz, and the buzz died shortly after the window for comment closed, and
Yeah.
it sort of has dulled down to a low roar. And
Yep.
I don't think they're particularly incentivized to make a decision quickly. And that is just the nature of bureaucracy. So
Yeah, and I guess it's good to know that like the way things are going, there's so many distilleries that are in the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission, the ASMWC, that have
yeah.
agreed on what they think American Single Malt should be, and the proposed rules from the TTB back that up. So whether it's ratified tomorrow or in another 6 months, it doesn't look like it's going to change the landscape of products available, only the precise ways in which they can be labeled, because
Yeah.
of the non-existence of a legally defined category to the existence of that category. So like the products match, the labeling can't be made as such until after those rules get published. But in any case, the more buzz that there is around this category, the better it is for the category. And I, as a relative expert in the community about American Single Malt, I hate calling myself an expert. It feels really conceited. Um,
I mean, you've done more research than almost anybody, and I think that it's telling that the person who called you the foremost consumer expert on American single malt was a producer. So there is that, and I think that adds some weight to the title. It isn't
Yeah,
nearly self-imposed.
I have been very careful to say that American single malt producer or producers have said that I'm an expert, as opposed to I'm calling myself an expert. But
Yes.
it still feels awkward to throw that around. But anyway,
Yeah. Shall we
people
talk
in the
about?
media,
Yeah.
yeah, we
Shall we
want
talk
buzz. Yeah,
about? Shall we talk about Scotch a little bit?
yeah. Let's do
Because
the plan.
I'm itching to talk about Pete.
Never met him.
Nice guy. Spells his name funny though.
Yeah.
Peat.
Yeah, that's not the only thing for Scotch. Yeah. So okay,
No.
I've got that up on the screen.
All right. So may
Yeah.
I ask you a brief question to start out?
Please do.
Of course.
What do you all think? So there's a concept thrown around every once in a while. Let's just talk a little bit about it. What do y'all think terroir is or area is, and does it really apply to whiskey?
Okay.
I'll let Phil go first.
So
Yeah.
very broadly, I'm not going to be able to say it because I'm not speaking to myself in a dark room.
I'm pretty sure it's called Terraria.
Yeah,
Yeah,
something
terraria.
Like terrarium, as it applies to beers and wines, is really important because so much
boy.
of the nutrients of the earth and the soil and the growing cycle of the plant affects what sugars are produced and what other uh, chemical components manifest in varying levels within the plant. So the process of fermentation doesn't change that very much, but the process of distillation does a lot to change what is present in the end product, and it strips a lot of the other things in favor of more alcohol and lighter fusel oils and that sort of thing. And and so there is a lot of terroir lost in the process of distilling, but having listened to what folks the guys at Waterford and at Brookletty have said about how different the wash after the first distillation run is between malts of the same variety grown in different places, leads me to believe that there has to be some effect, though I don't believe it is necessarily something that is perceptible to the average consumer.
Another thing, I suppose, to tack onto that. Now, do correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that with Scotch whiskey, when you are actually creating the Scotch whiskey, the grain that you use does not have to come from Scotland.
I believe you are correct because I know that for a while some of the malt houses were sourcing from France and other European nations. But that may be changing to an extent as those avenues are closed to varying degrees.
Yeah, I have a few things to add. Boy, what a horrible thing to do to my own production, to just like cut in with a long
Yeah, right.
I find it very interesting that this question is coming from what's the word?
Sommelier?
Thank you.
Sommelier.
Yeah, so wine sommelier. Which, if I'm not mistaken, Ian, you are or were. Does that expire?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't expire. I'm not currently acting in an official capacity as a wine sommelier, and I do consider it as a job. So I wouldn't call myself one right now, but historically I have been.
Do you
Okay.
still have the funky necklace with the bowl?
I'm sorry, the what?
I'm making reference to very super traditional French sommelier or sommelier,
Oh,
however you say
okay.
it.
No,
The
unfortunately, I only get lapel pins these days.
Mm.
ah
I thought you were making a reference to a certain group of people down in Austin.
See, and theirs is a reference to what I was making a reference to.
Right. That makes that whole thing feel a little bit better. Anyway,
Yeah.
so the definition of terroir for the audience is terroir is defined as the complete natural environment in which a particular wine is produced, including factors such as the soil, topography, and climate. And there's a footnote: the characteristic taste and flavor imparted to a wine by the environment in which it is produced. That's when you talk about terroir in a wine. Um,
Yes.
so the industry recognizes that there is such a thing as terroir in wine. And for people who are good at wine, and I'm not one of those people, it is something that is plainly detectable. The question here is, does terroir exist in whiskey? Which is a kind of a hot button, like, I don't think there's anything cancelable here. Like, I'm not worried to be talking about it other than to say, I don't think I'm qualified. Um, I mean, I have no qualifications whatsoever, so like
Yeah, same
that's
here, but that
that's
doesn't
easy
keep me
enough to
from
say,
running my
right?
mouth.
Yeah, but like I don't think I have enough information to really say whether that is. But there has recently been a movement to reframe what people are talking about in whiskey as that certain whiskey has what they call a sense of place, which sounds like kind of the same thing, but isn't such a loaded term the way terroir is with wine. Um,
I suppose at a basic level, the to sort of go to what you're saying, the big thing about when we're talking about terroir is we are talking about actual detectable things like actual chemicals and flavor compounds, and to a larger extent, what you can actually physically grow and create in a given region, and that. At the very least, to what you were saying, does not exist in the same way in whiskey. What I think does exist in whiskey to be is quite interesting. It is a sense not only of place but of history and of tradition, which is itself a part of terroir in wine, but takes a very different form in whiskey, I would say.
Is it too early to talk about peat and whiskey as it pertains to the subject?
No, I wouldn't say so.
yeah, let's let's
So
let's go off on this tangent. Yeah.
so one of the things that Ian is referencing when he talks about tradition is how whiskey was traditionally made, which involves the malting of barley. And the malting of barley is commonly done by indirect heat these days. But there are some malt houses, like I believe Port Ellen is still in operation, Baird's, and some distilleries, Lafroig, and a couple of others on Islay. I can't think of whether or not Bruichladdich operates their own maltings. I don't think they do, but I don't know for sure.
But what's interesting
But
about that in any case is that a lot of, well, Bruichladdich peat is mainland peat, is Highland peat.
oh yeah, so they
And some
definitely know.
of, so they could be importing the peat to a malt house on Islay, or they could have multiple malt houses that feed them.
Mhm.
I don't know the details there, but Bruichladdich is a particularly hard to nail down as if terroir is a thing, right? They talk a lot about where their barley is from and how it's cultivated and treated and stuff. But like ultimately they're trying to create a really flavorful product and sort of they also have an interest in sustainable farming practices and all that sort of stuff, but they don't say anything most of the time about trying to be true to where they are. And they do have a whole series called Isla Barley, and
Yes.
Have
so
some right here.
yeah, I should have brought
Um,
mine out. I think
one
my
of
Isla
the one of
Barley's
the
in the other
actual
room.
interesting things to kind of connect with this is earlier on when we or earlier on today, I believe, or was it yesterday? Doug asked some questions to the lodge,
It
to the
was
whiskey
Friday
lodge.
and Saturday. I sort of
Was it?
I felt so yeah. Yeah, my thought was we were doing a 101 series and we didn't really get any feedback from people of various skill level is the wrong term. various degrees of experience. Yeah, various degrees of experience with whiskey, from all the way from newbies through intermediate and expert. We have everybody like that in the Whiskey Lodge, like across the whole board. All the way from people who've never had a drop of whiskey before in their lives up to actual producers of whiskey, right? We run the full gamut in there, which is really cool. And we love giving people recommendations and like educating people when they have specific questions about like, hey, this is where I'm at. Where do I go? So I figured I would ask 101 style, like I would prompt people to respond to 101 style questions so that we'd have something to talk about. It's not coming from us on the topic of 101 stuff. Yeah, so that said, I'm gonna put this map up because leaving terroir up on screen feels silly at the moment.
Yeah, pop the map up right here.
Yeah, so
one of the questions
yeah.
Oh, go on, Doug.
Yeah, I'm just explaining the map. So like I'm gonna
move
on. I'm gonna move on from this real quick, but I just wanted to show people. So like this is the UK and Ireland here. And I just wanted to give everybody a sense of like where exactly is Scotland, because the rest of these maps are just Scotland, and Scotland is a lot bigger, I think, than some people think it is. So I just wanted to put that up there so that we can like go check out the regions now. And oh no, our faces are definitely in the wrong part of the slide for this. Here, I'm gonna hide. I'm gonna hide our faces real quick
because I'm covering up all of Lowland.
All of the Lowlands, yes.
I'm gonna hide myself too, I think. Why can't I make the faces go away? Come on. Come on. There we go. Right. Actually, I can fix this by just putting this on a slide and centering it.
So one of the things I wanted to get into a bit right before we get into the Scotch regions and things like that, the Pawn actually, hi there in the chat, asked a question. What happened to the slides? Oh no. The Pawn asked a question.
I did this on purpose.
Oh, okay, got it. No, okay, it looked really weird for a second. Pawn asked the question: what is the technical difference, or what is the? Let me actually read out the Pawn's question in more detail. I've asked the question and still would like to know where the Teeling Black Pits and the W.D. O'Connell Bill Phill compared to the big Islay peat monsters. And this is a really interesting thing when it gets into a sense of place and a sense of style and tradition. I have a bottle of the Black Pits sitting right here, and I actually did a very personal tasting of the Black Pits versus the Lagavulin 16 at some point. Both very peaty styles, but Black Pits taste notably different than most of the other peated whiskeys that I've had. It's much, much more bitter and earthy in some ways, despite being aged in Sauternes barrels primarily, I believe, or maybe just finished. Mostly done in bourbon and Sauternes casks, actually. So despite having some slightly sweeter styles of casks, the very, very bitter sort of, earthy styles come through, as opposed to this more maritime, sweeter, or kind of saline qualities like you would get out of Islay. Phill, you're smelling something over there. Which one is that?
Ardbeg 10.
Ardbeg 10.
One of the go-tos for like the big three style of peat, which is a very maritime, tarry, like beachside bonfire with tarry driftwood, and it is one of the more intense expressions of peat that I have personally encountered. I think perhaps the Wee Beastie is more potent. I'm not sure where my bottle of Wee Beastie is at the moment, though.
And how do you think? What are the flavors that you think you get from the actual Ardbeg right there in terms of peat and things like that?
So in terms of peat, there is a like really deep, like briskety burnt ends and like charred seaweed and that tarry, like if you've ever like if you've ever been involved in retarring the bottom of a boat or tar patching asphalt somewhere, you know that like smell that gets into your mouth. It's like a, a gritty, uh, almost petroleum, um, like bitter smoke, but it's offset some by the like iodine and salt wash of and sea spray like character of the Ardbeg.
That's very interesting. If I was to characterize the black pits, it would start out in a very, very similar way. This kind of very tar-esque, very savory flavor. But instead of resolving out into some more saline maritime qualities, I think the black pits goes, in my opinion, kind of over towards coffee in some cases. Very, very earthy tones, rather. Doug, what are you drinking over there out of curiosity?
I sort of so we ended up talking about Whiskey Lodge questions sort of earlier than I meant to. And I actually
My bad.
I sort of I prompted my brain with the answer to a question I was going to ask you guys. And I guess I'll explain what I mean by that later. This is the Lechaig, which by the way, Ledaig is pronounced Lechaig.
Beautiful.
Go figure. That's probably one of the strangest Gaelic pronunciations that I know of. Also, let me draw your attention to the color of this whiskey, which I don't know if it's going to come through on stream very well. And also I'm going to make it
Kind of a
bigger real
medium
quick.
amber, I would say.
This is, I guess you can't really tell, but this is actually on a wine scale, this would be called medium copper.
Oh, really?
Which is not a color you see in whiskey almost ever. And maybe you can tell a little better in the glass if I hold it out here. This looks like a rosé.
Oh, it does, doesn't it? That's fascinating.
So this is a peated whiskey from the Islands region of Scotland, which is kind of a semi-official, unofficial region of Scotland. And we'll get into that later because we were trying to figure out which just like how do they treat this and which distilleries are actually part of it. And it seems a little bit inconsistent because even the Scotch Whisky Association, the SWA, which is the governing body of what defines Scotch whiskey, it seems like they can't entirely decide whether the islands are part of the Highlands or they're their own thing. And we'll get into that. But anyway, I'm going to consider I think all of us, for the purposes of this conversation, are going to consider the islands to be a distinct region of Scotland. And so my question was, what is the region of Scotland from which you've had the most different expressions of whiskey? And since it would be easy to say Islay, and I'll give my Islay answer later as well. As far as the islands are concerned, I would say that the most different like whiskeys from the same region, probably from the islands, like Lechaig on one side, which is this sort of heavily peated, in this case wine finish. This is the reason this is pink is this was finished in a Rioja cask, which I think it said on the box and it doesn't seem to say it on the bottle.
It is finished in a Rioja cask.
Yeah, so this is Lechaig Sinclair series, and it is finished in a Rioja cask, which I'm surprised it doesn't say it actually on the bottle. It does say on the box. Or yeah.
This isn't.
So there on the bottom, it says Rioja cask finish. And also it makes note of the fact this is from the Isle of Mull, so they're proud of the fact that they're an island distillery. And I would say on the far opposite side, I would probably say like Highland Park 12, because it's so fruity and like baked bread. It tastes like it tastes like banana bread, kind of.
So I would like to say, for clarification, we don't mean the most different as in like as many different examples, but like the two most different.
Yeah, so I'm saying in this region, I have picked a region and have tried to express like what do I think the extreme ends of this region look like for me that I've tried at least among the things that I've liked.
So I was actually going. So I was originally also going to give the Isla answer, and I guess I'll give mine later on as well. But my answer was also Highland Park. So when I first started drinking, I had a Highland Park 20 year. I'll talk about that in a second. But on the far opposite end, more recently, I had a Talisker Dark Storm. I believe that was a double oaked uh, like travel exclusive sort of thing, and just the difference in philosophies especially really interested me. The with the Highland Park 20 year, and this was before they changed up their branding, so that's a whole other thing right there. But was very refined, was much older, was clearly meant to be drunken in a very specific mood and in a very specific style. But the Talisker Dark Storm was young, it was hot, it was dark, it was bitter, it was this incredibly intense whiskey in a wholly different way. And I suppose that we'll both talk about our Isla examples later on as well.
So that's interesting. We both picked Island as our backup answer. Phil, what was your answer to this question?
Highlands.
Okay.
So at one end of the spectrum, you have like the Glenmorangie. This is the original 10-year-old. It
Beautiful.
is a wonderful, light, delicate dram. This is aged in it is aged entirely in refill bourbon barrels. So not even like first fill when they get it. It is they're buying already used barrels in Scotland, I believe. And it's just this beautiful, light, airy dram. And at similar end of the spectrum, you've got Blair Athol, which is one of my favorite uh, distilleries. Full stop. Beautiful looking distillery, and they make a wonderful, gentle sherry dram, and it's just a nice, simple, wonderful. This is very much what I think of when you say Highland. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the Balakin by Edradar, which is a heavily peated Highland single malt whiskey. This particular example is a sherry cask aged. It's 12 years old. It's bottled at cask strength. It is. Oh, and I'm not going to be able to get this open with my fingers. It is beautiful. It is robust. It is like drinking a burning orchard. And look at that color.
This is the
That's
Balakin.
gorgeous.
Yes.
So not to disagree with you, and that is a beautiful color. Not to disagree with you, but I think Balakin is the only Scotch I've tried that I have not really liked that much.
Oh, interesting.
And you know what? It's been a while since I've had a sip of it, so I'm actually gonna go pull my bottle out. I also have a signatory vintage, but a different bottle from you.
I will say that my only bottle of Balakin is a uh, is a single barrel pick for the Whiskey Barrel, which is a whiskey shop in the UK, and they do lots of online sales as well. So it is sort of a hand selected single barrel.
So here's mine. I would say a similarly beautiful dark, uh, sort of copper-ish amber. Um, this one was the subreddit Scotch, uh,
Mm.
single cask pick. This is matured in a first fill sherry bud for 11 years, so full maturation sherry. But what I remember about this one is that it always the sort of quality of the smoke in it was like extremely like mouthful of dirt.
Interesting.
And you didn't like that?
Funny enough, no, and you would think that I do because
You
I
love having mouthfuls of dirt.
yeah, I love eating dirt. Uh,
I,
because
I
I
was
so
watching Worst Cooks in America with my parents earlier, and they had someone who was poorly peeling potatoes, and they had an advisory at the bottom of the screen that said that the Food Network does not advise eating dirt or does not endorse eating dirt.
yep, I guess that's going to be a highlight of this stream now, David.
Yeah, right.
This is your first task as editor. Go turn that into something.
The Whiskey Lodge does not endorse eating dirt.
No, yeah, I need to.
I
I need
don't
to share
endorse
with
eating
you.
dirt, but I do. What's interesting about peat, and we'll get into it, I guess, when we'll get really into peat when we talk about Islay, because it's kind of impossible not to.
Sure.
Right? Peat is kind of like the sludge at the bottom of a lake or a bottom of a pond that has then
Or a marsh.
been compressed over time and turned into um okay.
It is
we'll address that comment in a second.
it is primarily biological things like seaweed, sticks, bramble, trees. Um, the peat bogs in the Highland tend towards being the remnants of ancient forests and fen, where it was like brush or scrub that's been inundated with water and created an anaerobic um, environment where they very, very slowly break down and become something else, which is peat. Um, and that, to an extent, impacts the flavor imparted by peat. Because like the peat bogs in the Isla are heavily influenced by sea spray and being so coastal and having a large percentage of the biomass that becomes peat being things that have endured sea spray and coastal storms.
Mhm.
If you actually pop over to the
Whereas
Isla slide, it'll have some of those locations on the map if you'd like.
Yeah, I guess
um,
if we just want to like kind of go out of order, we can totally do that.
We
I
can
was
also
just
do
going
that.
to
Yeah.
give an overview of peat in general
Yeah.
Yeah.
and how in Highland peat it's a totally different beast. It delivers totally different flavors of smoke. Um and like the Edredor to me presents as a very woody smoke with like all that sherry influence. Like I said, like a burning orchard or vineyard or something, but that fruit, the wood smoke, the slight earthiness. And I really like it.
And Balakin is from Edredor, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the peated brand from Edredor.
Never actually had the stuff myself, and I do rather enjoy their unpeated whiskeys.
I do
I have
also. I think this is one of those things where so peat character, if we're going to talk about terroir, you're literally taking something out of the ground. By the way, the other way of looking at what peat is to think of it as pre-coal. So like everything that coal is, peat is that, but like several millennia earlier. It hasn't quite gotten to the point of being a rock. It is more like dirt. Um,
mhm.
and so yeah, when I say I love eating dirt, which was totally a joke.
It's your favorite pastime.
And of
That's the
course,
only thing I really know about you.
I was reacting negatively to the sort of soil note that is in the Balakin that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's not as bad now that I guess this has been open for a year and change. And I've kind of been ignoring it. So like whatever phenols I was reacting negatively to maybe have dissipated a bit. Um, or my palate has changed and I'm like more okay with whatever that is. But yeah, the sherry part of this is beautiful. I would love. I feel like I would love this in a non-peated form more than I like the peated form of it, which is something I never thought I would say before I had this whiskey. Proving that, there are no absolutes. I am not simply a lover of heavy smoke. Yeah.
No, I do need to get you the Desert Door Sotol, an agave adjacent spirit, not whiskey, but tastes like sucking on potting soil. It's excellent.
You
It's one of my
normally,
favorite things to drink. Yeah.
normally I actually think that in a lightly peated whiskey, I normally remark that notes like potting soil and loam, I actually really like those notes because it makes me feel like I'm outdoors.
Yeah, a lot of potting soil has peat moss in it. If that's
Oh,
what
that's
one of the main
true.
components of it. Yeah.
So I'm okay. So I'm like I'm tasting peat, and I'm saying
Yeah.
this tastes
This
like
tastes
loamy
like peat.
soil. It tastes like what it is. Well, that's good. I guess that
Yeah.
means the palate is working. Uh,
Yeah. Um. Oh gosh. Ooh, I had another thing to say before we got into our talks. Oh, right. I did actually want to ask you all, just very briefly before we get into our whole talks about the actual areas proper. So we've all noted like the biggest difference between whiskey is in a certain area being between an unpeated whiskey and a peated whiskey. Is there any kind of maybe honorable mentions that you'd like to call out between two whiskeys that are both peated or two whiskeys that are both unpeated?
you make a very good point,
Yeah,
and I
that
wish that I had anticipated that because it's so obvious that that was going to be the easiest thing to call out.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
let's go to Islay again and talk about unpeated
okay.
whiskey from Islay.
Okay, go on.
Bunnahabhain and Bruichladdich.
Yes, Bunnahabhain and Bruichladdich are both known for both their unpeated whiskey as well as their peated whiskey. And in fact, Bruichladdich almost feels like they want their unpeated whiskey to be the primary thing because they say the classic laddie is their brand for the unpeated whiskey. Um, and I was actually gonna say,
Same, the
and
only.
I don't mean for this to be like showing off. And I wasn't even gonna say Bunnahabhain as the comparison. I haven't had a whole lot of unpeated Bunnahabhain, and to be honest, I much prefer the peated Bunnahabhain. And
The peated Bunnahabhain is better. I'll say that.
I also much prefer the peated Bruichladdich, the Port Charlotte and the Octomore. But Kalila, peated Kalila is like peat smoke for the sake of peat smoke. But unpeated Kalila is beautifully fruity, especially like older, like 18-year-old unpeated Kalila is super fruity, like a really nice balance, like a heavy body, like just absolutely top-notch whiskey that I wouldn't be surprised to learn came from a region like Speyside, which is known for that style of whiskey. And yet it is, having had enough Kalila, it is exactly what it sounds like. It is Kalila if you subtract the smokiness from it. Like somehow you wouldn't think that works if you're used to peated smoky Kalila. But it does, and it tastes like exactly what you'd expect it to taste like for that. It's just surprising the first time I tasted it. So I would say unpeated Kalila versus the unpeated Bruichladdich, because Bruichladdich really relies heavily on their wine cask wizardry, which is that they'll take first fill and second fill and full maturation of different kinds of sherry and sauterne and other sorts of dessert wines and other sorts of non-dessert wines. Like they've got a bunch of red
Which is
wine casks
unfortunate
in it.
because I actually think that their bourbon finishes are my favorite.
Yeah.
Also, I hate to do this to you. I've just been informed that there is a massive storm rolling in just a little bit here. So I'm going to be right back because I need to go secure some things outside. Give me just about
Sounds
10
good.
minutes or so.
Yeah, I guess we'll
While
go ahead.
while he's doing that, I'll talk about something relatively interesting. I have only ever had unpeated Bunnahabhain, and for a long time, my favorite unpeated Scotch was the Bunnahabhain 12-year-old because it is just in my opinion, wonderfully well-rounded and deep spirit that I could have sworn, like the first time I had it, if you had told me it's got just a little bit of peat, I would have been like, oh yeah, absolutely, I can taste it because I feel like I can. Whereas, sort of conversely, Highland Park 12, everyone goes, oh yeah, I can totally taste the smoke on the Highland Park 12, and I sit there going, I don't get any smoke at all. I get like heather honey and like a little bit of sea spray and so on and so forth, but I just don't get any smoke at all.
Yeah, worth
Um,
calling out. The the Islay style of heavy peat, which we've also noted in some islands whiskeys like Lecheg.
yes,
And Balakin is a Highland whiskey, right? Some
there
whiskey
we go.
distilleries have treated peat as the flavor. And that's
Wow.
that's for several reasons. It's more of a recent thing because now you have the choice
Yes.
of indirect heat, which doesn't have any smoke in it because you're not exposing the burning of the fuel directly to the barley. So that's removed the sort of necessity that there's going to be peat smoke in most things.
Hmm.
And also because of blends. So blends are usually looking for like really clear flavor profiles to work with. And so you have something which is completely unpeated and is really trying to be heavy on apple and cinnamon flavors. And you've got something
Hmm.
that is peated and is just going to taste like smoke,
Like, yeah.
like your Kalila, which is just kind of a plain smokiness. I
And
just realized the reason my head was so low in my video is because my standing desk was too high.
ah, I've been sitting here on my spinning chair that had gotten turned around, going, why am I having so much trouble like sitting upright? Is because my spinning chair, which doesn't have a back, had gotten backwards,
Hmm.
and so the nice cushiony part was forward, and I was sitting here going, I am awful uncomfortable. I can't figure out why.
Yeah, on this show, even
Um,
when we don't have technical difficulties, we still have technical difficulties.
yeah, just different kind of technical. Well,
uh,
um, but but also in the difference between two unpeated spirits or two peated spirits, I I feel like it's really easy to call out like, okay, you know, in the Highlands, say let me get to it real quick. Ugh. The old Pulteney or old Pulteney Navigator. Beautiful stuff, very maritime. It is, in fact, called the Maritime Malt. Yeah, right there on the bottom of the tube. It is a beautiful, briny, unpeated, like not even a wisp of smoke, just wonderful dram. I absolutely love this stuff, and I am disappointed that it's been discontinued.
oh, that's too
And
bad.
then at the other end,
Old
of course.
Pulteney is still going strong though as a distillery, right?
Oh, yes. Yes, they are. It's just the Navigator expression that's been discontinued.
Hmm.
And so I will never be able to find another bottle of it after I bought it the year that it was discontinued and went, oh man, I need to find more of this. And it's not going to happen, but that's okay. And then you compare that to another Highland, unpeated Highland single malt like the Glenmorangie, which will always be the archetype for me of the clean, fresh, malt character heavy, honeyed, sweet, gentle dram. Like that's just what it is for me. And it doesn't lack depth for being that gentle, sweet, honeyed dram. It just makes it much more approachable and a very light, a good introduction, I think, to Scotch single malts, in my opinion. Glenmorangie notably also does a lot of really interesting things with finishing that I wish more distilleries would look into and look into making part of their core range. Um, like they've got, and it recently changed, but it used to be their original 10-year-old would then go into a sherry cask and become La Santa, or a port cask and become Quinta Ruben, or a Sauterne cask and become a Nectar d'Or. And they all went into these finishing casks for 2 years. And that's changed slightly because now the Quinta Ruben is a 4-year finish and the others are 2-year finish. And they did special edition finishes, like they did Tales of Cake, I think. That was a Tokaj wine barrel finish that was a very sweet, honeyed, nectary, and fruity single malt, which I regret that I didn't pick up a bottle of when I saw it. That was NAS, and which means non-age statement. But they're sort of, oh, here's our 10-year-old original. Now you can compare it to what 2 years in a Sauterne cask does, 2 years in a sherry cask, 2 years in a port cask. And that was a really cool thing and a great way to see what those finishes did. And I've gone off on a wild tangent about, how cool one of a distillery that I, barely ever drink from anymore, unfortunately.
Hey,
They also have
I was just enjoying it. Like yeah, like you've picked a distillery that like really lets you explore a lot of facets of what Scotch is. Um, I guess so. We sort of went on a little bit of a tangent about terroir and didn't really finish that conversation, which to be fair is like
right.
a whole video worth of conversation. But one of
Yeah,
the
and
things that I wanted to bring back to front of mind for that conversation is recall that we've basically said on multiple occasions that flavor comes from a few main places in whiskey production. Let me get the microphone just a little bit closer to my face because I feel like I'm kind of quiet. Chad, am I quiet
just a
today?
little bit. Just a little bit. I also
The game's all right.
did D today,
How
and
about
my
this? Am I too quiet now?
how about now? Oh, I'm not going to do that again. I'm sorry.
That was a little bit loud. um, okay, so before I go off on yet another tangent, did I say before that I don't particularly like unpeated Bunnahabhain?
Yes, you did.
What I meant by that was I prefer peated Bunnahabhain, and it is
Yeah.
entirely because of this bottle. So this bottle looks like the other bottle, but this is, instead of being the Balakin, this is a Bunnahabhain Staucha, the heavily peated.
Ooh.
And this
And I'd love
may
to
be
find
the
some of
best
that.
Scotch that I've ever had. At least I felt like that when I bought it. Let's see if I still think it's great.
I will say that I am constantly disappointed reading the reviews of heavily peated and even moderately peated Bunnahabhain, and then having to confront the fact that that will never be available where I live, because
Yeah.
state-controlled ABC is not great for trying a lot of different things.
It's easier for you to get the most common bottlings of
Yes,
things. Yeah.
and
So this one is beautiful. So this is it's a young heavily peated whiskey, which is one of my favorite styles and is very different from an old unpeated whiskey, which is like almost the opposite end of like where the flavors come from basically. But the primary flavor in this one is not peat, despite the fact that it's only 5 years old. This was matured in a dechar rechar hogshead. Hogshead is
ooh,
almost certainly a sherry cask.
right.
No, that would be a bourbon, I think.
No, a bourbon would be a American Standard barrel. A hogshead is larger than an American Standard barrel.
But they're made with the same length of staves, just more of them. So like a hogshead is a rebuilt American bourbon barrel, generally
Oh,
speaking.
okay.
Um, but I think that's not the only use of hogsheads. But sherry is usually butts, which is the size of
Yeah,
cask. We talked about that in the past. But
and
it is spelled
port
B-U-T-T.
comes in pipes.
Yep. Um, so a dechar rechar hogshead. So what that means is they stripped off the char layer from our mic test was an ASMR stream.
Oops.
So what they did with this barrel was they took it apart, stripped off the char layer from the inside of the barrel, and then recharred it. Um, and it's interesting that they say dechar rechar instead of. There's another type of cask rejuvenation called STR, which means shaved, toasted, and recharred. And I think STR is what they use is they do that for they do that for wine. I think like the distinction between dechar rechar and STR is a slight difference in process, but it also gives you a hint as to what the barrel had before. Yeah, is that an STR or is that just new oak?
This
Sorry,
is
for audio only listeners, Phill
oh
is
yeah.
holding up Lagavulin 11 Offerman edition, which is fantastic.
This is the Charred Oak Cask Edition, which is the third release, I believe. Because the first release was just an 11-year-old. The second release was finished in Guinness casks, and I wish I could have gotten my hands on that. And the third edition is in. We collected charismatic casks of American white oak with a few European oak thrown in for culture. Wait, hold on.
What was the first Offerman edition? I have samples of at least the second edition. I don't remember if I have of the first though.
Give me just a moment to think about Nick Offerman for just a split second. So the first Offerman edition was just 11 years old. I was just basically selected casks that were 11 years old. This one, we collected charismatic casks of American white oak with a few European oak thrown in for culture, all of which had previously held either Scotch or wine. The cask's interiors were shaved down and heavily recharred before we filled them with our golden 11-year-old single malt whiskey for maturation. I am rather proud of my Nick Offerman impression.
Yeah, that was a pretty good one. Let's see. Do I have another I don't have like a better view where you can see the whole website, but yeah. So one of my favorite things about these boxes. So Nick Offerman himself insisted on writing the copy for these bottles.
And Nick Offerman is a genius.
And he's great. And he actually Lagavulin is his favorite whiskey. The fun story about the Parks and Recreation thing is that the producer, you know, wrote that Ron, Nick Offerman's character in Parks and Recreation, would be a Scotch fan. And they didn't like tell him ahead of time what the prop would be because like they, you know, whatever, right? And
Yeah.
and he would have assumed probably it would just be prop whiskey. And without any kind of sponsorship or anything like that, what the prop that happened to be on set was a bottle of Lagavulin 16, which just so happened to also be Nick Offerman's favorite whiskey. And so that became a thing about the character. It wasn't just Scotch, and it wasn't just generic whiskey. It was always Lagavulin.
Lagavulin 16-year-old.
Yep. And he parlayed that into a whole brand sponsorship and like celebrity, like, so this is probably one of the most like the celebrity whiskey with the most integrity because it actually comes out of
Yes.
production trivia. And
And-
he's genuinely a fan. And it comes
Yeah,
across
it's
that
the
way.
genuine love too.
Yeah.
Like the little tagline on the inside of the cap of or top of the box on this one is, "Let the flames of your passion run wild, but keep a pail of water handy for the oak." Nick
That was a
Offerman.
surprisingly good impression, honestly.
It is. It's a really good
Thank you.
impression. And I'm not
So,
even
hey
going to
guys,
try.
I'm back. How you
But
doing?
yeah, so one of the bits of trivia about this series, he's done 3 of these bottlings now. And by the way, I have the same 3rd edition Lagavulin Offerman edition in a charred oak cask, which as far as I know is actually a new charred oak cask.
Oh,
I was reading off the back of it.
And it says it's not.
What I read about the charismatic American white oak with a few European oak thrown in for culture, previously held Scotch or wine. The cask interiors were shaved down, then heavily recharred before we filled them.
So it's a shaved. It's either an STR or a dechar rechar. The terminology is pretty close to equivalent. Anyway, my favorite bit of trivia about this series is that Nick Offerman said, if I'm going to put my face on a bottle, I want the words to be mine. And so he actually wrote the copy for the bottle. And I love that for all of these, on the front label panel, it says, "I have traveled the world and sampled many attempts at pleasing nectars, but it is solely this distillation of Islay, a tiny charismatic Scottish isle, that has claimed my palate. Yea, and my heart into the bargain.
Into the bargain. He is a poet.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, there's 3 paragraphs of prose written by Nick Offerman on the back label of this box.
Yeah.
Sweet Jesus.
Which if we had another 10 minutes to kill before Ian came back, we could read through that.
So I left and you all started talking about Nick Offerman's lab. I've never actually tried them. They have them in my
they're beautiful.
Costco, I want to say. So they are
Do
good.
they have all 3?
No, just one right now.
Okay, so remind me, if you know, what were the 3 editions of the Offerman edition? Because I know the second one was stout casks.
So the first one was just essentially a hand-selected batch of 11-year-old casks of Lagavulin. The second edition was finished in Guinness stout casks.
Ooh.
And the third edition is the shaved and recharred American and European oak casks.
So I for sure have the second edition, and I have a bottle of the third edition. And I've been meaning to do a side-by-side comparison of those. The third edition is very different.
Third.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Unfortunately, I can't give you a sample of the second because I don't own a bottle, so I don't have enough to share.
That's okay. I will find it one day.
That's all good, Genji. We sort of did an aside to just talk about Nick Offerman's poetry while Ian was securing things for the storm. So yeah,
weather was crazy around here.
I probably need to put away this Stoutia because per my comment earlier that this is one of my favorite scotches, revisiting it now is making my brain not pay attention to the podcast. But it smells amazing. It tastes delicious. There's a perfect balance between the heavy peat and the heavy cask influence of the Dechar Rechar cask. And when that balance is achieved and you've got the notes that you really like and care about, it just there's nothing quite like finding that whiskey that does it for you. And this is that for me. I don't know if I would necessarily rate this as highly as some other whiskeys, but this is for sure up there in the high 80s to low 90s of points that I would give it. And my scores are like, I'm kind of harsh with my scores. Like an average whiskey gets a 75, right? Like a C.
As it should, honestly.
Because I never liked like wine, like a half decent wine is 92 points.
Oh, a half decent wine is 93 points. Yeah, it's wild. I hate it.
Like for me, a half decent whiskey gets a 70 to 75.
So what's interesting is there are basically 2 very different ethoses to scoring drinks displayed by the spirits sort. Oh, good night, Pawn. I want to make sure that I respond to that as I see it.
Sláinte.
So that we can.
Sláinte.
Pawn.
Sláinte. Take care, and thanks for coming to see us.
Grab a whiskey. Sláinte. See you in the lodge. But we're not signing off yet.
Nope, not yet.
We've barely even gotten into our topic yet today.
Yep.
Sorry. We've been going for an hour because I keep getting distracted.
That's fine. We said we would allow that to happen today.
Planned.
Yeah, it's good.
So
you know what? I'm gonna pour some of that. You just poured some of the Offerman edition, right?
Yeah, I did
also gonna
just
have
a
some.
hair. So there are 2 ethoses of scoring. One clearly on display by the wine enthusiasts who rank anything, very, very high numbers, but has gotten to the point where you're looking for like a 96 to 98 if you're really looking for a good wine. And a 93 is Whereas in whiskey, I have had a lot of whiskeys that are sort of generally rated in the like mid 80s that are fantastic drams because whiskey is scored on a much wider scale because just through like unintentionally, I would assume, just the scale has shortened so much on wine that everything is 90 points. And if it's below 90 points, you probably shouldn't be drinking it.
It's not like whiskey scoring is a new thing, though.
No,
But I wonder, though, if
just
this
a
trend
different
of
ethos.
scoring things on a wider scale is nonetheless a new idea. I'd have to go look at the Michael Jackson reviews to see how he rated things. I don't know if he actually did give numerical ratings. And by the way, Michael Jackson was a spirits writer, not the pop star. Happens to be two
that
Michael
guy.
Jacksons.
He wasn't
in the world,
both? He
Oh yeah,
wasn't both?
the first time I saw Michael Jackson wrote the whiskey, the Scotch whiskey Bible or whatever it was called, I was like, wait, Michael Jackson was a whiskey connoisseur?
Well, that's
Yeah,
something else.
turns out different Michael Jackson. And he's one of the
So
most notable figures in whiskey reviewing.
Yeah, I've more or less eschewed a numerical rating for anything I
yeah,
review.
that's about where I am. I
Yeah.
try to paint a picture of the product in my hand with my words.
Yeah.
Though typically not as fantastical as yours, Ian.
I really like that kind of review, and I posted one review on Reddit that was like that, which
Oh, you got to be careful with that.
yeah, I mean Reddit's not the best place probably to be posting like reviews that are pros-ish, but like
Yeah.
yeah, I had posted this review and it was a Japanese whiskey. I'm a little bit ashamed of this review because I got so much blowback, and partly because one of my issues with the whiskey was that I paid a premium price and the packaging was not premium. And I'm talking
Mhm.
this was review number 2 if I'm not mistaken, possibly review number 5. Or 6, something like
Okay.
that. Like the first stuff that I had reviewed. And it was what was the whiskey? It was the Nika Taketsuru Pure Malt Black Label.
Mm.
Oh, that one. Okay.
And I had written this whole thing about how I'd gone in the store and I found this Japanese whiskey I was excited about, and it looked really pretty on the shelf, and it was $80-$90, I forget, I think it was $90. And I take it home and I take off the outer wrapping, and then it's a plastic screw top. And my opinion on plastic screw tops has actually changed a lot since then, because it turns out cork is actually a
Sure.
bad closure for
Oh
whiskey.
yeah.
And like
Oh yeah.
Pretty bad.
a good quality plastic closure on whiskey is way better at sealing, keeping it fresh, like all this sort of stuff. But because I was used to cork is the luxury thing, and I paid a luxury price tag for a whiskey, and what I got defied my expectations, despite myself, because I always want to just review the liquid. Despite
Mhm.
myself, I took away points from my rating of this whiskey for the packaging, and I was rightly blown up for that. Like, I deserved that entirely. However, the writing of that review I think was very good.
I see. Was
I
it
would like
a
to.
quality screw top? Out of curiosity.
Oh, it was for sure. Yeah.
Okay, like
I
one of
would
those
like
nice heavy
to
ones.
remind the audience that the sort of picture that Ian paints when he reviews a whiskey. Race car piloted by a sentient pile of seaweed.
I forgot that I said that last stream. My whiskeys are rated on whether or not I have an out of body experience while
um,
drinking them.
hey, that's good. You can tell whether I like a whiskey by how much I write about it and how many words I use to describe it. So, this is another whiskey from that brand I'm talking about. The actual bottle I was talking about is further back, but this has all the same issues. This was $10 cheaper and actually is one of my favorite Japanese whiskeys, period. This right here, I've got like an inventory label on top. Don't worry about that. This, like, it looks like gold, but it's actually plastic. Screw
Mhm.
top, which, like, yeah, there's threads in there. And it's got this compressed foam plastic lined thing, right? This thing
Right.
is not the absolute best thing for holding in odors, but it's way better than the actual like oxygen porous cork, which whiskey doesn't need after it comes out of the barrels, right? So like this is what I was upset about, because I paid $90 and I got a plastic screw top, but it turns out
Yeah.
that like the plastic screw top is actually great. Yeah.
Yeah,
Phil's holding
my
up
favorite.
There we
Phil's
go.
holding up what
What
we
is that,
call
Phill?
a polycone cap.
Yeah.
Oh,
Which basically has a uh, a cone in the center made of um a
It's a
I
phenol resistant.
yeah, polyphenol something, and it presses downward against the mouth of the bottle and creates a better seal. It is reusable. It doesn't degrade like the foam wafer, for lack of a better term, and it isn't oxygen porous like the cork. And I have had a couple of bottles with corks fail recently, including fairly new bottles. I mean, like, where'd it go? Not that Knob Creek. Like this Knob Creek, which you may guess based on the fill level, I have not had for very long. I've had it for like maybe a month. But this is a replacement cork because the cork that came with it snapped off.
Yeah.
And it
Does Knob Creek
PSA.
use real corks?
yes.
Oh wow.
So PSA here. If you get into whiskey to the extent that you're buying bottles that may have been sitting on a shelf for a while, or you're the kind of person who's going to keep bottles on your shelf for a while. So that's the first thing I said was about the store.
Definitely
The second
not
thing
me.
is about your own. Yeah, all that stuff behind you. You go through it really quickly,
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, I don't mind
finished the dust.
Yeah, I finished like a dozen bottles, and all 3 of those cabinets behind me are filled, or getting close to filled anyway. Just because I never finish anything. So yeah, PSA: keep your corks because there's not that many different sizes of openings. And like there's a few. Like if you have a cork fail on you, it's really good to be able to just replace the cork with a bottle you've already finished. That you kept the cork. And also keeping the corks is kind of a way to preserve an aspect of your collection. Like people who drink wine keep their corks. I'm not even like a wine enthusiast, but I believe I've kept pretty much every non-broken cork from a bottle of wine ever. And like that's come in handy too, because those corks are different sizes, and I've had corks fail on me, and then I need something to close the bottle with.
My dad's making
Also-
a giant table out of wine corks.
Nice. That's a good thing.
Also, in a pinch with a good awl and some string, you can sew those onto a jacket and float. That is actually terrible advice. Don't try to take that advice, but it's a plot point in a book that I read a million years ago.
Okay, I'm glad
What
that
book?
wasn't like an actual. Yeah, yes. Answer that question.
The Shipwreckers.
I
Okay.
don't know that book.
That sounds potentially like a fun read.
Yeah.
It's about a kid who ends up in the crew of a smuggling ship who almost get tricked by shipwreckers who try to run them
people who-
onto some rocks on an island.
Yeah, my favorite shit.
Oh, like people who induce other ships to wreck.
Yes.
Yeah,
Not
they stand
people-
up on like
Not people who've come out of a shipwreck.
No. Like people who light fires on the wrong parts of the beach to direct you between 2 lights onto rocks.
Mm-hmm.
bunch of that happened back in the Carolinas back in the day in Georgia.
And then of course they're going to steal
coast,
all the loot and cargo from the
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
And off the coast of northern Scotland and parts of like Wales and then thereabouts. Yeah, low budget
sirens.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Yes. That's yeah. Okay, so answer some questions from chat. So the pawn was reading something from, I don't know, he didn't state the source, but basically it looks like a general definition probably taken from a blog or something. Maturing Scotch whiskey is kept in oak casks, sometimes called barrels, hogsheads, or butts. Casks are sourced mainly from the US and Spain, where they have previously been used to age whiskey and sherry. Yes, but that's a highly simplified version. Cask is the general term, and we've talked about this on a past podcast, and I meant to like make that a topic video segment, but I need to go find it now. Cask is the general term for any size of wooden barrel-shaped, roughly, container.
From pin cask to like buttload.
Right. So there's, and we gave a nice chart and everything, but like the different sizes of casks and like height and diameter and purpose all have different names to them. And so when you get into the real specifics about Scotch usually makes a point saying that they have that the type of cask that has been used in the aging profile, which usually also implies a type of wine or some other thing that was held in a cask, some type of wine or whiskey previously held in the cask, which is part of what feeds into the definition or part of what feeds into the flavor profile of a whiskey, and is a very common practice in Scotch whiskey to like the balance of the single say we're mostly talking about single malts today. We talked about the different types of whiskey before.
Mm.
Single malts are sort of the most varied expression of Scotch whiskey, and we mostly focus on single malts for the purpose of geekery. And also for regions, because we're talking about single distillery stuff. So you've got single malt and single grain. Narrows when we're talking about regions, it narrows it down usually a lot. So yeah, single malts. I would say even there may be even some regional stylistic choices, the tendency towards a certain type of cask previously. So like the tendency towards ex-bourbon casks, or the tendency towards a certain type of sherry cask, or the tendency towards mixing sherry casks, or a tendency towards refill Scotch casks, where they're going for as neutral of a cask as they can because they mostly just want time in the barrel and not barrel flavor. You can also argue those are individual distillery decisions, but you might also be able to argue that they are in fact regionally inspired decisions. And we still haven't really gotten into the definitions of the regions, or not definition. They're not. There's not.
Well,
Shall
we
we-
should talk about that.
Yeah,
We should. We
yeah,
should.
shall
We should get
take
back on
shall we
topic.
take a little dip in there.
Oh, and by the way, to answer the question, behind me, I have I think these are both squishmallows. There's a giant cheetah squishmallow, and there's also this water buffalo squishmallow.
Water buffalo is adorable.
And the reason for the water buffalo is because like for some reason my beard has always reminded my wife of water buffaloes. So yeah. Also, I drink a lot of water. She calls me water buffalo sometimes. Anyway,
Far from the worst pet name. Sorry, Ian.
water
what were you
buffalo is
saying?
it the worst pet name? I don't know.
Oh, I said far from the worst.
Oh, far
Far
from.
from the worst.
Yeah.
There's worse.
Yeah, let's
What was I
yeah,
saying?
like
Oh, I was
like
saying we
dirt
should
eater.
take a little- Dirt eater. our pet name for Doug.
Yeah, okay. Let's do this thing. The thing that the topic of this stream is supposed to be about. Wait, did we okay, we sort of meant for the questions that I had come up with to guide this podcast, but let's go through the slides just a little bit here and see what we pull out.
Yeah, let's talk about this. Yeah, there are 5 official Scotch regions: Highlands, Lowlands, Islay, Campbeltown, and Speyside. We're technically counting a 6th, but the islands, but that does get complicated definitionally right here. So these guys are the ones that you gotta know when we're talking about legal definitions.
Yep. And the legal this is literally there's no dictation legally on the actual style or any decisions that are made in the whiskey production process due to the region that they're in.
Unlike wine, yeah, there are no specific styles that the whiskey like has to be, which is an interesting thing given that they are legally designating the regions. It almost makes it more of a marketing decision than anything else, somewhat. But we won't get too far into that one right there. So Highlands, you got a lot of going.
I was just going to say, I like that my 2 favorite Highland distilleries are right next to each other. Blair Athol and Edradour.
Oh yeah, I guess they are, aren't they? They're
That's
right next to each other. Wow.
Why did I
Sorry,
like
I got
that?
distracted.
That just seems generally right. Like I don't know why, but like somehow in my head I have that they are like a pair. Are they owned by the same people and like make a different style with like 2 different distilleries, but like something like that?
They are not. Blair Athol is owned by
No way.
owned by Diageo, because same company that owns Daluin and Talisker and Lagavulin, and the list goes on. Although, interestingly, Blair Athol's malt primarily goes into Bell's blended Scotch. Which is unusual, I think.
Indeed. All
Sorry,
right,
I got
so
distracted again.
no, you're super cool. I also got distracted by something. So, in a general sense, the Highlands region, while it technically encompasses the Scottish Islands, we're not including those in this particular one. There's going to be a fairly wide range of styles and things like that. But in general, you're now correct me if I'm wrong in anything I say. You're generally not going to get particularly smoky whiskeys from most of these distilleries right here.
Yeah, I just
The
I wanted to get rid of our faces from the stream real quick so that you can see that there are actually distilleries way farther north in the Highlands. So you've got
Old
Wolfburn
Pulteney,
and Old Pulteney, which are like way up there, and like besides that, Clynelish is the most northerly distillery, which is very close to all those other distilleries, even.
And then you got
so
stuff like Glengoyne, which borders right up on the lowlands. And actually, there's actually going to be a few other distilleries right over that border on the lowlands map as well.
Yeah,
so
what's interesting.
interestingly,
Yeah, go ahead.
I've got just a couple of fun facts because I absorb fun facts like a sponge. So Glengoyne has their distillery on one side of the road and their maturation warehouses on the other. Their
Really?
maturation warehouses are technically in the lowland region. The other one of the other fun facts I have is that until I believe it was 2017, Old Pulteney was the northernmost distillery in Scotland, situated in Wick. And in 2017, when Wolfburn opened in Turso, they became the most northerly Highland distillery in Scotland.
And are there more northerly distilleries that are not in the
There,
Highlands?
there, there are more northerly distilleries that are not in the Highlands. I misspoke before because there are 2 island distilleries at least that are farther north in Orkney.
Yep.
Which is Scapa and Highland Park, although I think that there's a third one that somebody's trying to get up and running on Orkney, but I'm not sure.
There
The third
should
Oh yeah.
be.
Let's yeah, so I guess we don't need to get into like all of these distilleries, but just like the
No.
thing to
Yeah.
point out is that, and by the way, the reason that Milburn is a different color is that's a grain whiskey, right?
Milburn is, I believe, a silent distillery. I
Oh,
Oh,
is
don't
it?
think they're
meaning they don't
producing anymore.
release. Oh, they're not producing anymore. Okay.
I believe so, but I could be wrong because I don't believe Milburn is a grain distillery. But I'm going to Google that real quick.
No, it's currently not producing right now. It was closed, and apparently it was technically demolished in 1988. But the
Oh,
site of the
unfortunate.
distillery is still hanging around.
And there's still theoretically whiskey aging somewhere. But yeah, anyway, so the thing to point out is that there's a lot of distilleries in the Highlands. Like this is like Scotland's not that big of a country. Like it's like I pointed out on a map before, like it's big, but it's not like that big, all things considered. And you've got a lot of distilleries here. But also note that there's only maybe 2 or 3 dozen distilleries in the Highlands.
39 exactly.
Yeah.
Well, including Milburn, so 38.
Sure. I guess let's so with that in mind, let's move on. I think. Yeah. Cool.
Much smaller area that we're coming up on this next time.
No,
The
I'm hiding faces
island.
again. Yeah, so just real quick, so you can see the stuff that's up high north and down south. You've got Scapa and Highland Pork on the Highland Pork.
Highland Pork.
Scapa and
My
Highland
favorite
Park
type of pork.
on the Isle of Orkney, which is way north. And also less protected from like just being out at the sea. So like that is going to have an impact on the aging of the whiskey. You know, I said earlier that there was no requirement other than the region of describing what needs to happen with the regions. That is true. They're all held to the same requirements. If I'm not
So
mistaken, no, that's not right. You don't have to even, so the whiskey has to be distilled in the region. It does not have to be aged even in the region, but a lot of them
That is
do.
correct. Yes.
So I do want to offer a correction. For some reason, I really thought that Oban was on an island, and it just wasn't on the map. Don't know why I thought that. It is not on an island, and I am just wrong.
Okay, where is Oban?
I believe
Oban is
in-
actually right across the sound from the island of let me check. It's right across the sound from the island of Carrera. In
Okay, so you can see it here off the top left corner of Phil's face
Stafford.
on the Highlands. It's on the mainland, in the Highlands.
yeah.
Yeah, so it is on the mainland. I just thought that it was. It's in Stafford. No. Where is it actually? No, it's in the town of Oban. My bad. Just right across the Oban Bay from the island of Carrera. So my sincere apologies about that one.
On this map for the islands, wanted to clarify. You see the red text. That is the island's name, and in some of the cases here, the island and the distillery have the same name. So for Jura and Arran, that is true, and for the other islands, that is not the case.
I would like to point out that there is a new distillery on Skye, other than
I was
Talisker.
actually about to look that up. What is it called?
Torrebeg.
Ah,
Also, Arran operates 2 distillery sites on the Isle of Arran.
That's
One of
correct.
which is Locranza, and the other one, the
It's
name
Lag.
of is yes, thank you.
Yeah, so even though
Um,
they say the Arran distillery there, on the Isle of Arran, the Arran distillery is made up of 2 facilities. And that does not, since they are the same distillery, like owner, complex, whatever, under the same name,
yeah, they're
just because
they're
there's 2
counted the same.
sites doesn't mean that they're considered to be a different distillery, which is kind of an interesting
Yeah.
thing. Because
It's
Arran,
just a fun fact.
yeah, so like normally you'd say it's not a single malt if you mixed whiskey from 2 different distilleries. And that's even if they have different names. So you can have things like if you had a Tobermory and you added a little bit of Lecheg to it. Lecheg is Tobermory, it's just peated, and they used a different brand name. It's not a different distillery. So that still counts as a single malt, even though it's a blend of 2 brands. And Arran, you can blend the Locranza and the Lag, and it's still considered a single malt because it's from the same distillery manager, and all that sort of stuff. Some trivia. There's lots of words on screen. I haven't been paying attention to them.
not all.
I
of
don't
them
think we've been saying them.
matter. You know, they are just a general explanation. There's a lot of variety in the islands. Some of them are going to be smoky. Almost all of them are going to be maritime in quality. To say somewhat saline, but they're all going to be, quite a lot of them are going to be notably distinct from each other. You can see the sheer amount of latitude that this region covers. Like there's ones incredibly far south, like Arran, mixed with ones much further north, and like you said, unprotected, like Highland Park and Scapa on the island of Orkney. So these guys, they're going to taste quite different. People are just going to have some different ideas about what they actually want to do with this whiskey overall.
And there may be some commonality just because they're surrounded by the water. There's like things about being an island. Well, technically, Great Britain is also an island.
Yes.
With multiple countries on it. Big enough to have multiple countries, so it doesn't have quite the same island characteristics as a smaller island. But yeah.
Once you get past 2 countries, the characteristics change entirely.
Yeah, it's definitely about the number of countries.
And now also keep in mind that these are not the only actual distilleries on these islands. There's rather a lot of gin distillation happening on these islands as well.
Oh, good call out. Yeah, we're talking about just whiskey here.
Yeah, we're
Yes.
talking about just whiskey right now. But I have a little map up right now because I was curious. There are so many more distilleries that are out here than just whiskey distilleries, and they're all apparently some pretty good stuff. But we won't be touching on them too much today.
Yeah, I was like, did I miss Speyside? You put Speyside last. I find that interesting, but
I did put Speyside last.
Yeah.
Which is funny because that's what I'm drinking currently, because I figured that'd be second.
Yeah, like it would normally make sense to put it second because and I guess I'll point out for the audience, you see this this gray area in the middle of the map? That is Speyside. Speyside is technically Highland as well. Distilleries in Speyside are allowed to call themselves Highlands if they want to, but Speyside is considered to be a more specific region. And I guess we'll get into that later. I just to me that felt like the right place to mention it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be honest with you. That was not for a specific reason. That was probably just Ian being making decisions. Honestly.
Okay. Well, in that case, should we go into so we don't come back into it?
We can pop down into down at the bottom into Speyside. The actual reason that I put Speyside last was because I was actually likening it as a sort of foil to Campbeltown, with Campbeltown having the lowest amount of distilleries out of any of these, with Speyside having the most, as it were.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
So just real quick, because you mentioned that a Speyside distillery can decide to call themselves Highland Distillery, you will see on this map that Glenfarclas is right near the center of the map. I mean, not really. It's sort of south of Imperial and southwest of Ben Ren's, but on their packaging, they call themselves a Highland single malt Scotch whiskey.
Yep, and another really notable one is Macallan calls themselves a Highland whiskey. Highland perhaps sounds fancier, or at least more distinctive, because as you can see, there's like 50 distilleries in here.
50 distilleries in the Speyside, and it is significantly smaller than the Highland region.
Yeah, in that it's a nice tiny, tucked away in this central part of Scotland. The central part of the Highlands. And Speyside, by the way, this is a reference to the River Spey. So there is a river. Yeah, there's a river that runs through this region. You can see this blue squiggly line marked that goes through here, and this is where most of these distilleries are getting their water from.
I believe one of the exceptions to that is Tomintoul gets their water off of runoff from, I believe, nearby mountain ranges.
Well, that makes sense.
Read all the text on a Tomintoul bottle while waiting on a bus once. It was sealed. I wasn't drinking it. I was just waiting for an hour and a half for a bus.
That must be the funniest thing for other people at the bus stop to look at. They're like, hey, this guy has a bottle of scotch, but he's not drinking it. So, like...
Should we be concerned?
Yeah, so I mean, it'd be
worse, for sure it'd be worse if you were drinking it. It's just that you're defying expectations. Like, that guy just has a bottle of whiskey just, like, out. And he's just staring at it. Is he okay?
Like, just looking at it. So good to note on the for Speyside right here. As you can see, there's a lot of distilleries that that one might probably recognize by walking into any whiskey store that might have Scotch available. We're talking Macallan, we're talking Balvenie. Let's see,
next to Balvenie, you've got Glenfiddich and Kinninvie, Glenallachie, Mortlach, Petitveig. Where is it? Speyburn. That's one that you see a lot.
And also notable, the two best-selling single malt whiskeys in the world, the Glenlivet and Glenfiddich, are also present here in Speyside.
Are they really the best-selling?
I believe so. Yes.
Like singular. Yeah. I mean, I know they sell a lot, but are they singularly the best?
That's what they're cited as. Yes.
Cool.
And what's funny about that to me is Macallan has a much higher production quantity. than either of those distilleries. The Macallan literally produces 11 million gallons of spirit every year.
So where's it going if they're not selling it?
It's going into casks to eventually be bottled at 72 years old and then
Oh,
released to
I
canners.
was
Oh
gonna
yeah,
say,
yeah.
I was gonna say,
They
yeah,
can
they like,
so they can
yeah,
put it out for the next coronation.
yeah.
Yes,
Macallan,
yes. Oh, but
Macallan
that won't be too long.
does have a 12-year-old, does several 12-year-olds actually. Macallan does
Yes.
sell like a 12, 15, and 18-year-old. Those are sort of like the standard Speyside ages in that
Mhm.
range in the teens. But they also like they market themselves as a super luxury brand, and they also
Yes.
let a lot of whiskey get really old. And as we talked about in the well, I don't even remember what episode at this point, but I'm pretty sure we've talked about this. Like, older is not necessarily better, and older is more expensive. And one of the reasons that older is more expensive is because the longer it sits in a barrel, the more of it evaporates. So you could be, and also sometimes those casks fail. The longer, like, there's just a chance that any given cask is going to fail in any given year, and just let all the whiskey out onto the floor before they have a chance to
There
stop it.
there is a great video. It is grainy as heck because it is ancient at this point, of two Jameson employees in one of the Jameson or Middleton warehouses with flashlights between a row, looking at a massive puddle of whiskey on the ground, going, "Ah, shoot, which barrel failed?" And the panning upward at like a massive stack of barrels that are all dripping with whiskey because one of the barrels just sort of let go.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so
Mm.
that can happen, and that means that that means that all this whiskey they're producing, there's a chance that a lot of it ends up in the air or on the floor.
Yeah, we've
Uh,
actually had a lot of issues with that at Del Bach this year because we had such a hot summer that several of the barrels have cracked right around the bung and just started dripping.
and you were saying apparently some stuff that went onto trucks exploded.
Well, so when we shipped out some bottles, the so much pressure built up inside the
Just
bottle, the corks
really
just
quick,
shot
gentlemen.
out and spilled everywhere. Yeah.
It Genji is going off for the night,
Oh
so
yeah.
All right,
good
you have a
night. It
great
was
night,
great
Genji.
seeing you.
Good night, Genji. Thanks
Want to
for
make
joining
sure
us.
that we catch you as you're leaving, and thanking you for showing up.
Yep.
We appreciate it.
Slasha.
Cheers.
So, a fascinating thing that I just found out. So, the top selling Scotch whiskey, or the top selling single malt in the world, actually, is going to be Glenfiddich, with the second best selling being the Glenlivet. Um, Now, interestingly enough, was unaware of this, but the Glenlivet, owned by Pernod Ricard, one of the biggest alcohol beverage companies in the world, the Glenfiddich, owned by William Grant and Sons, an
Hmm.
independently family-owned people that own a lot of Scotch out in Scotland. They're still quite large, but very interesting to distilleries right here. Very sort of on opposite sides of some of the things.
I would like to say I do like looking at this map and being able to go, oh hey, there's my favorite Speyside distillery,
Yeah.
um, which happens to be Dallowin, which is totally unrelated to the fact that they had a locomotive.
What, the distillery had a locomotive?
Yeah.
Are you sure
Um,
it's unrelated to that fact? You mentioned it very soon after introducing the distillery.
it's just sort of one of those, like, Speyside never really grabbed me. But I on impulse picked up a bottle of the Flora and Fauna Dallowin 16-year-old,
Oh,
and
beautiful.
it is remarkably good. I enjoy it. And I did not know that they had a locomotive until I read the text on the front label of this bottle. Um, For more than 100 years, all distillery supplies were dispatched by rail. The steam locomotive Dallowin Number 1 was in use from 1939 to 1967 and is preserved on the Strathspey Railway, and it is currently on loan from the Strathspey Railway to Dwars Aberfeldy.
Oh, that's very cool, actually.
Just realized I could
I
have made
just
our
find
faces bigger for a lot of this because we're not actually
Oh,
reading
sorry.
off the slide. But I mean, I guess you can't really see the map, and so that's why I did this whole thing with our faces here. But yeah. Like I think points about Speyside have been made pretty much. There's a huge concentration of distilleries here. A lot of the scotch that you're gonna like, if you randomly pick a scotch off the shelves, especially in a state like Virginia where you mostly get the most common stuff, or really any liquor store, most of the whiskey that you're gonna see is actually gonna come from Speyside. And even then, from probably just a handful of these distilleries, the larger ones of these. And
Yeah.
now there's also, funny enough, as similar as they are, so Speyside as a region probably is the most similar in style. And I guess it's worth talking about why. Because like so far we've been talking about regions where like, there's a lot of differences in the style. And we talked about, we found huge differences on Islay, and which is a tiny, tiny region. And mostly that's because of the way that you can apply peat lets you have a lot of different types of whiskey. And then on the
Mhm.
islands, there's just the latitudes are huge, and even in the Highlands, the latitude range is huge, and they're just so far apart from each other that even if they were learning from each other, they would probably have develop different styles due to relative
Mhm.
isolation, talking about going back centuries before instant communication was a thing. In Speyside, everybody's practically in the same town. I mean, not literally, it's like a big region still, but like they're all along this river. They can easily commute and visit the same markets and learn from each other. And so whatever style is prevalent in the region could easily spread to other distilleries making whiskey in sort of the same style. Why? Like why? It works. And whiskey takes a long time to age. So if you know that it works for somebody, you're going to do the same thing. Um, and so that's one of the reasons that a regional style exists. And of all the regions in Scotland, Speyside has the most distinct, common regional style, leaving aside Campbeltown, which has so few distilleries run by so few people that the concept that there is a regional style there as opposed to just a distillery style um, is that line is blurry. Not enough data to make that conclusion. Um,
Interestingly enough, to put this all in perspective by just size, the longest distance between any two distilleries, so far as I can tell, between Ardmore and Benromach, is about 50 miles.
and those are the two farthest apart.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. Just looking to see if it could possibly be something to do with Glenglassaugh.
Almanach and Glenglassaugh, maybe.
Like
Yeah,
possibly, but
Yeah,
I think you're
that'd be
right.
my guess.
I think you're right that Ben Romick and Ardmore are probably the farthest apart from each other. But either way, yeah, about 50 miles. That's not very far.
No,
These days, that's like an hour
that's
of driving.
yeah.
that is an hour and 4 minutes exactly.
Yeah. It depends on how the roads go, of course, but like, yeah, and traffic.
Now, if you're stopping at distilleries along the way, the trip does take considerably longer.
Yeah.
A few days at least.
Yeah.
Yes, for
Oh
safety
man.
reasons.
Yeah, right. When I go visit Scotland, I feel like I'm gonna need a week and a half, just because I'm not gonna only want to go to Speyside,
Yes.
and I'm gonna have to skip a lot of distilleries too. But yeah, and also Glenfiddich. Where's Glenlivet on the map? So Glenfiddich is here, pretty close to center. It's east of this little bump in the river. Where's Glenlivet? Can't see it.
Glenlivet is so
I
hard to find.
saw it a moment ago. Sorry, I'll pause.
Glenlivet is bottom center, more or less, above Tamnavulin and Brayville.
Oh, okay. It's hidden by Phil's camera. There it is. Yeah, bottom center. Yep. Yeah, for some reason I thought they were like right down the road from each other, basically. Apparently that's not the case. But
They're
Glenfiddich
all
and
right down the road from each other, more or less.
yeah, Glenfiddich and Glenlivet, first of all, I think that we can probably universally recommend if you're getting into Scotch single malts for the first time, you
Oh,
should
yeah.
buy one of those. Like almost without
Their
question.
special editions are also quite good on both of them, honestly.
Yeah. Now, I personally think among the 12-year-olds, which are the ones that you're going to get for between $30 and $40, maybe $45, the Glenlivet and Glenfiddich 12-year-olds, Glenfiddich 12-year-old is the better of the two whiskeys in my personal opinion. It has a little bit more complexity. According to the Wikipedia, Glenfiddich is actually very lightly peated to 5 parts per million phenols.
Huh.
And I have been there are people who think that so there are people who say that's true but only for the older style stuff, and there's enough of that around still that it's worth mentioning. There are some people who say that's true for all Glenfiddich. There's some people who will insist it's not peated at all because they can't taste it.
Mm-hmm.
At those levels of peat, your choice of how you distill could very easily remove smokiness and leave you with just a
Yeah.
kind of a canvas on which to make whiskey. Like a canvas on which to base the flavors of the whiskey. So it's it's very reasonable that like a peated whiskey, like peat is a seasoning, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
salt is a seasoning. It's also a flavor, but like bear with me for this analogy. Um, so in the classic times of like everybody's peating their whiskey because that's how you dry it, which is part of the production process before indirect heat was a possibility. um you would always get some kind of peat smoke in your whiskey, not necessarily a lot, because to make a heavily peated whiskey you have to really be trying. Like you have to keep remoistening it so that it collects more of the smoke, because smoke only sticks to wet barley, um, that sort of thing. So you have to be really trying to make it extra smoky. But to make a little bit of smoke stick to it is almost an accident. And it turns out that it makes good flavored stuff. It's a nice seasoning. It's not the flavor, it is part of a flavor profile. And that's how whiskey used to be made before like the 80s. Um, like most whiskey was at least lightly peated because it was tradition. And then there was a whole thing in the industry where like production really tanked. A lot of distilleries closed, and when everybody reopened and changed the styles and updated their equipment, a whole lot of distilleries that weren't known for peat stopped putting peat in their whiskey at all. Um, so this is similar to the idea that like salt is a seasoning. You should put salt in your food. It makes it taste better. But if your food tastes like salt, you've put too much salt.
Yeah.
Unless you really like salty, but like salt flavored potato chips, and like on occasion I do for sure. Like, but you know what I mean, right? Like there's a difference
Mm-hmm.
between it tastes like salt and salt brought out the natural flavors of the other spices and the actual stuff that you're cooking. A big difference there. So yeah, Glenlivet, as far as we know these days, most of it is not peated at all. But either way, Glenfiddich 12 has more of a like, it's hard to read. I don't know if I believe I have written a review, and it was directly across from um it was Glenfiddich, Glenlivet, and the Balvenie, which are the three easiest to get space, like the three most affordable, at least when I bought them. Balvenie's gotten a lot
Mm-hmm.
more expensive recently, but
Yeah, it is.
when I bought them, they were all $30 to $45. And they're
Um,
super common. So those 12 years you can find them. And so I did a review where I side by sided those three.
Speyburn is another one that is they sell it at 10 years old. It is like $29.99 to $35 for a 750. Sorry, I had to look up at my shelf to remember what it was called,
That's
even though
pretty
I
good.
can't see it.
I don't think I've
It
ever seen
is
Speyburn in a store, or like I've never heard about it enough to pay attention.
it is very much a very beginner friendly boilerplate Speyside, but it is very affordable. It is a little bit sharp for 40%. But it does develop some interesting character with a little bit of water.
Nice.
I
Good to know.
believe that it is primarily refill hogsheads, or refill American oak barrels.
To sort of briefly finish my thought here, I think of
Sorry.
the 12-year-olds, Glenfiddich is the best. It has the most character. Um, for the older expressions, I have not been that impressed by older Glenfiddich, but I've been very impressed by older Glenlivet. So like Glenlivet 18 is delicious.
The cognac cask 14-year-old Glenlivet is very interesting and enjoyable. Um, I think that adds the depth that it needs. The finish adds a lot to that, and just because I found Glenlivet 12-year-old to be a fairly um, I mean, there are no off notes in it, but there is nothing that pops out to like impress you or greet you to like dig into it. It is a very simple, plain spoken malt.
And my personal take is that most of Speyside is that way, but I've recently learned that if you go outside of these most common super commercial whiskeys, there is more variation than you would initially think among the Speysides.
I encourage people to find an IB Dalawan because I really like the 16-year-old Dalawan. It's got some like licorice and like butterscotch and like lots of like grain flavor for a 16-year-old, and then a nice blanket of sherry sweetness and just a little like simmering of smoke around the edges.
By the way, IB means independently bottled, which means that it was bottled by someone other than the distillery itself. Still a single malt.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I should have thought of that.
that's just fine. And by the way, the opposite, we say OB or official or original
Mhm.
bottlings, which means the distillery bottled it themselves. So it'll say like, it's original branding. So like that Lagavulin you can see behind Phill really clearly. It has Nick Offerman's face on it, but that is the distillery's own branding with that oval, like
Mhm.
the vertical rectangle with the rounded edges.
Yes.
So that's but there are independently bottled Lagavulins sometimes, not that many of them because I think Lagavulin doesn't do so much volume. Also, Diageo does not. Diageo is the owner of many distilleries in Scotland and
Mhm.
elsewhere. And Lagavulin is one
And
of the distilleries that they own, and also Kalila. You can kind of tell from the corks, actually. They have the same cork.
yeah,
Um, and Oban, and
Dalawan,
is it Glenfarclas?
they do not own Glenfarclas.
Okay. But they basically they own one from almost every region. And yeah, there you go. Perfect. Yeah, so you can see they have the same bottle, basically. Or exactly the
Yeah,
same.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. So the first time I got a bottle of OB Kalila, which is funny, I had so many bottles of IB Kalila. The first time I got an OB Kalila, I was like, wait, why is this Lagavulin's bottle? And then I realized it's because they're both from Diageo. They are the Diageo core malts. You can get a
Mhm.
taster of like 5 or 6 of the Diageo core malts. But the point being, most of the distilleries that Diageo owns, they don't sell as independent bottlings because they want to protect their brand and control the whiskey that they produce. And that's their company philosophy. Nothing wrong with that. But it does mean that. So the interesting thing about IBs is when a distiller produces something that is off profile, meaning it's not bad, it just doesn't match their
Mhm.
core releases. One of the things they can do with it is sell it to independent bottlers. Um, and then
And
you get interesting facets of their whiskey from a distillery that you wouldn't normally get to experience.
and if it's got the name on it, it will almost never be outright bad. There are
Hmm.
lots of mystery malts that aren't bad, but have some characteristic that is unusual to an extent that a distillery might not want to put their name on it, but still good enough that an independent bottler is willing to put theirs on it.
Yeah. And the other thing that
Um,
happens with off-profile casks is that they may sell it for blending. So we were talking about blended malts or blended whiskey. So Kalila is used a lot for smoky blending stock. If I'm not mistaken, the smoky component of Johnny Walker is Kalila.
yes.
All right,
Anyway,
so
yeah,
we've
let's move
talked
on.
a lot on Speyside.
Because it is the big one.
It is the big
Let's
one.
move on to the lowlands. Smooth sippers, we say.
All right, so there's a very interesting bit of this map. Now, unfortunately, the map did not have a very high resolution, but I chose this map because, as you can see, all of those kind of dark red distilleries on that map are, in fact, closed malt distilleries. So there used to be way more lowland distilleries than there are now, which is somewhat fascinating.
Oh, sorry, did you say the green ones are closed? The green ones are the only ones that are open.
The green ones are the ones that are open. The dark reddish, brownish ones are closed.
Yeah. So there's so many. Basically, the lowland is like the region that like whiskey distilleries did not survive the downturn of the 80s.
No.
Why? Dunno. All the lowlands that I've had have been good.
Yeah, and there may be some survivorship bias to that.
That's fair. That's
Because
fair.
Fair enough.
like Auchentoshan, Glenkinchie, um, there's two others that I know that I've had samples of that I can't think of the names of off the top of my head. I'm not gonna be able to remember what they are.
Yeah. You know what? I'm
Uh,
gonna go hit up Wikipedia.
Yeah, totally. Here, I've already
yeah.
got the Wikipedia open. So the
Um,
active lowland single malt distilleries are Elisa Bay, Annandale, Auchentoshan, Bladnoch, Borders, Clydeside, Daft Mill, Eden Mill, Glasgow, Glenkinchie, Kingsbarns, Lindores Abbey, and Lochleah.
so I have had obviously some Auchentoshan, which is interesting because it is a triple distilled single malt as opposed to double distilled like most Scottish single malts. Glenkinchie, Glasgow, and you just said it, and I can't. My brain is shot.
Ooh, I
Had a
don't
long
know.
day.
Yeah, we've been
Work
going
and
for a
D&D
while
and
too.
Yeah. So there's a lot to the lowlands. We'll hopefully you remember. Tell me if you remember. Oh, Phil, there's a
yeah.
lot to the lowlands that we enjoy. There aren't that many active distilleries anymore. Interestingly enough, there are, according to Wikipedia, of course. So take this as you will. In development right now, there are about 9 distilleries, including Ardgowan, Bonington, and Rosebank, which is an
Is
old
Bay.
distillery that is currently being refurbished, as it were.
Ilse
Interesting thing
Bay
about
is
this
one
map
that I
from
tried that I forgot.
2013 is that
Yeah,
they've listed a number of distilleries that were in planning or construction.
they have, haven't they? Yes.
I don't know that
So
I've
I
seen from those distilleries the names that I'm seeing: Lindoris, Inchdarney, Kingsbarns, Ladybank, Mellerstein or Mellerstein, Starlaw. I think I have not seen any whiskey from these distilleries yet.
So
I've
Lindor's
not seen
Abbey
any of
is
those.
operating. They produce a relatively small volume at the moment. Kingsbarns is operational. The others, I don't believe they are. Glasgow is up and running, of course, and they make some interesting products.
For a
Yeah.
little while, Lindor's Abbey was selling its Aqua Vitae, something I really wanted but have never been able to find.
Uh, I believe that was a UK only thing, but I could be wrong.
Makes a lot of sense. King's
I
Barnes.
Yeah.
I also believe that that was sort of a biding their time thing.
Yes. King's
Um,
Barnes appears to be an extant distillery, as it were.
Meaning it still
uh,
exists, right?
Yes,
yeah,
yes. Currently is making whiskey. Never seen any of their stuff. They
I
make
I'm getting distracted by trying to read this map. I love maps.
the maps are super. That's one of the reasons why I got really into making the things, because there are a lot of cool maps. So it looks like the King's Barnes, they have a ex bourbon barrels and ex red wine barriques. They're calling it the Ducat. They have their Balcomi, their sherry cask matured, and they have what they call their Dream to Dram, ex bourbon and ex red wine as well.
hmm.
Unclear of how that one is different than the Ducat, actually, because interesting.
Yeah.
Not quite sure.
So for
So
lowlands, I'm not sure that I would say there's a unifying style, other than they tend to have a heavier body than Speyside, and even Highlands.
they tend to be a little bit heavier, but they vary. by a better percentage than, like, for example, Speyside. Um, and they tend to be fairly easy drinking for the heft of their body. Um, like for example, the Auchentoshan American Oak, which is their non-age statement entry level dram, is a very like dense uh flavored whiskey. Like the flavor in it is very dense, but it's also not very exciting. It's primarily the just oak um and grain flavor that sort of mingles into a sort of a monotonous sort of brick of flavor rather than having like interesting peaks and valleys of flavor with like discernible like malt notes or interesting barrel notes that you can pick out.
I feel like that's my favorite way to describe the word smooth. Like, whiskey tasters hate the word smooth because,
Hmm.
what do you mean by smooth? And there's a lot of words that sort of mean the same thing. One of the things I would say is that like it doesn't like turn on your it doesn't the profile doesn't turn on you suddenly. Like what you smell is what you taste, and it doesn't do
Hmm.
anything funky on the finish either. It just kind of tastes like the same thing all the way through. Smooth is a hard thing to analyze from a tasting notes perspective because
Hmm.
it's really hard to pull out any particular fruit flavors or any particular nutty flavors or whatever. It's just like this thing tastes like itself. Which could be
I
the mark of a really good whiskey, or if you're like me, you like to really have a
eh,
lot of complexity that you can pull apart. It's like the analyzing is the fun part, but not always.
I will say the most interesting note that I get on this is kind of like a low-lying cocoa Rice Krispies note throughout, which if you're unfamiliar, think sort of artificial chocolate with like the like puffed rice flavor added,
I
which
just
I
I just
think
had
is
another
really
sip of the Balakin, and like every time I do, like I get this quizzical look on my face because it just like it's so strange to me. I think this particular it may just be this bottle. Like, and I
hmm.
don't mean just this bottle, I mean it might be just this cask. It could be just my bottle. I don't know, because everybody else who had this seemed to love it. Um, but like even Jura isn't this weird to me.
Jura is weird.
Sure, it is weird.
Like I honestly like usually I can take a dram and figure out where they were going with it. I can never figure out where they were aiming with Jura because it's always sort of a we were trying something cool and different and landed solidly into mediocrity because we were unwilling to take any risks to achieve that. But also we've stepped back so far on it that you can't tell where exactly we were hoping to land.
Probably to move on. Probably best to move on from.
Yeah, sorry.
um, we can talk. I don't know. We can talk about Jura sometime. There's so many
Yeah.
topics in whiskey to talk about. Like we'll never run out of
Yeah.
things to talk about. That's
Oh
for
yeah.
sure.
No,
Yeah.
I've actually found something that we should add to the list because as I was looking something up, I have found a fascinating website created by I believe a Japanese man at some point. This is a rough looking website, I'll be honest with you. Detailing every single closed distillery in Scotland that the person could find, along with all of their
Oh,
locations and things like that. I'm gonna send it to the Discord right here.
that is extremely cool. And
Yeah,
I will get buried in that on my lunch break tomorrow.
I just wrote it on the
go
sticky
for it.
note.
Excellent.
Now if we won't lose it. We have a spreadsheet, by the way. We officially really do have a spreadsheet that has all the ideas in it now.
We should put them all on like one of those digital picker wheel things that you can click the button and it spins and then lands on something.
I like to think that we're doing a better job of like planning what content we're gonna do now, but
Oh yeah, definitely. I just because the idea of just going onto a stream one time and going, okay, what are we talking about this week? And seeing what we can do would be just fascinating to me. Ooh, Isla.
Isla. Now,
Isla, the only one we can talk about for longer than Speyside.
yeah, and we've already been streaming for 2 hours, so we're probably gonna add a whole hour doing this.
To be fair, we've talked about Isla a lot thus far.
That's true. That's
Yes,
true.
we have. We opened up with
yeah.
Isla.
Now that's right. We talked a lot about Isla when we started. Now that we've gotten to Isla, maybe we should go take a poke at those. Take a peek at and poke the answers to those questions that we had.
Yes.
Yes.
What's y'all's favorite Scotch whiskey area?
Isla.
Isla.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
almost
Isla.
a meme that Scotch lovers love Isla. For me, like, Isla whiskey is what brought me back to Scotch after a long time of thinking I didn't like it or it was too expensive. And to be fair, most Isla whiskey is on the expensive side, so
It is.
I was not wrong about that part.
So
But yeah, let's start with just recapping what it says on the slide. Isla is
Yes.
known for very smoky whiskeys. That's not all they have. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of variety in even just the smoky whiskeys. But
Oh,
they are
yeah.
known for the extra smoky whiskeys. And you've probably heard all the big, and there's only 9. The fact that we didn't list all of them almost seemed like we love them all, right? You got Ardbeg, Bowmore, Lagavulin, Bruichladdich, Laphroaig, Bunnahabhain, Kilchoman,
Ardnahoe.
Ardnahoe. Then there's
Kilchoman.
the closed ones
Bruichladdich
too,
yet?
yeah.
There's a lot of closed ones, yeah.
Yeah.
Ardenisel, Ardmore, Dail, Freeport,
Kalila.
Kildalton.
We've talked about almost all of them at one point or another in this podcast. Laphroaig, yeah, just going around. You can go mostly go clockwise around the island. Start with Ardbeg, Lagavulin, Laphroaig. Port Ellen Maltings is the one that so Maltings is making the barley smoky because distilleries usually don't do that. Laphroaig does it, but not all of their malt is from their own maltings.
Fun fact, they're going to be building a distillery at Port Ellen. I think they've already broken ground on it.
So are they going to be trading on the name of the closed Port Ellen distillery?
I believe so. I'm hoping for something that is almost unpalatably industrial, based on Paolo's descriptions.
Well, that would be the old style stuff. The new style stuff is probably going to be more in keeping with what people expect, and also what Port Ellen Maltings already does. Okay, so question, because Diageo, I believe, is starting to withhold peated malt from distilleries they don't own, and they own Port Ellen Maltings.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
So Bruichladdich is going to be fine because they get their peated malt from the Highlands.
Right, I believe from Baird's. Although it is undisclosed.
Yeah.
I don't have some inside track. That's just a guess.
Now, you saying that kind of makes it sound like you have a source.
I don't. It's because there are 4 producers of peated malt in Scotland. One of them is Port Ellen. One of them is Baird's, and the other 2 are basically essentially in-house operations run by distilleries. It's hard to. Uh-oh.
I spilled a couple of drops of whiskey from a glass I thought was empty on my keyboard.
Oh no. But basically the next best option after Port Ellen is Baird's. Baird's notably provides malt to distilleries in the US as well, interestingly. Not very many, but a couple.
One of our favorites.
Yes.
One of our favorites.
Yes, indeed. But
I think Balcones malt, Balcones peated malt is also from Baird's, right?
I think so. I know that at one point they were talking about trying to peat their own malt, but I don't know where they were at on that, or if that was anything more than.
It's being done, right? I think Andalusia has their own peat maltings, and they use imported Scottish peat to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, is that
Um,
so?
There's
but I
a
mean,
there's a
it's
nice
one of
whiskey
those.
tribe video where they go visit their malting, and they talk about that.
So
Also,
it's one of
Rex
those.
eats peat
Yeah. Yeah.
for fun.
Which.
Says
Yeah.
it tastes like nothing, tastes like dirt. What you would expect. It
Yeah.
doesn't taste like smoke at
Yeah.
all because it hasn't been burnt yet.
Um. But that's one of those weird like things that if you hang around like listening to like people talking, I mean, especially when you're like listening to like podcasts and whatnot appearances. I typically don't actually listen to podcasts, but if there's an interview with someone that I find interesting, I'll give it a listen. Um, and you'll hear, like offhand, someone will say something like, "Oh yeah, we were thinking about doing X," and then you lose your train of thought or something, and you miss the second half of it. And so I've got this like vague, like I feel like I've heard someone say something about, "Oh yeah, we wanted to do X, Y, or Z," and in a couple of cases, it was like after looking it up, it literally was like, "Oh yeah, we're going to try this," and then we discovered exactly how much work that would be, and so instead we import import our peated malt.
Impult, new word, means the importing
Yes,
of
impulse.
malt. So I since we're on Islay now, I decided to pour
Yes.
myself a 20-year Lafroig from Single Malt Whiskey Society. This
How's
is
that?
29.167 WOWF. Strange name.
It's
This
almost a
is
noise
this
that I
is a
made.
refill ex bourbon. Yep, and I think it's not finished. I think it's just 20 years. I love that. So one of the nice things about SMWS is I hate reading it before I do a review. But because I don't want to be influenced by somebody else's flavor notes. But I like that they do have tasting notes written on the bottle.
Hmm.
That makes
Always
if you're
enjoy
the
that.
sort of person who like doesn't want to think too much about your whiskey before you enjoy it, or like you want to know what it tastes like so you can try to like start finding those things, like you're learning how to taste whiskey. Um, then a bottle that actually gives you a few tasting notes can be a good thing. They don't all do it. This one is like a lot of tasting notes though. Like something like a Glenfiddich or an Ardbeg is gonna say like Ardbeg says. I don't have one. Oh, I do. Um, I have the Wee Beastie still next to me from Thursday. Um, it's a smoky chocolate tar, savory meats, black pepper, and pine resin. So like that's 5 notes. Like that's kind of a lot for your average whiskey. Um, and here on the single malt, the SMWS has a dozen tasting notes, some of which are like unfamiliar to me because I'm not a Scottish person. Like I don't know what Fisherman's Friends are. I just don't. Right? I don't like
Wait, Fisherman's Friends are a tasting note?
yeah, I think Fisherman's Friends is like a kind of candy or something.
I don't know. I've never heard of that before. That's wild.
All right, to Google.
They're a musical group.
Oh,
Somehow I doubt that that's meant to be a reference of
They're little okay, they're little like mint sucker things. They're in honey and lemon, mint, cherry, and more, apparently.
oh,
they're
They're
cough drops.
lozenges. That's what they are.
that makes sense.
Okay. So medicinal is, I think, the idea.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm glad that like before you looked that up, I had already smelled it because this does
Ah,
smell mintier than most whiskey that I would say. It has a
Ah.
distinct like when you like smell a mint, you get this like cooling sensation in your nose. That
yeah,
menthol.
sure.
It's like yeah.
Hmm.
I don't get that sensation from a lot of whiskey. So yeah, as far as Isla goes, since most of our answers to these questions were Isla, right? So we've asked what's your favorite Scotch region. Yes, we all agree Isla. We love that
Yeah.
extra smoky whiskey, and we love what they can do with it. With extra age, the smoke comes down, and you get a lot of tropical flavors. It pairs well with a really intense wine cask, so you get like the heavily smoked but also sherried whiskey that goes really well. Um, I'm answering the second question. What draws you to Scotch
Yes.
from this region? Right? It's just that
Yeah.
it's there's so much you can do with a heavily smoky whiskey to start with, and also um they just do it really well. The execution of a lot of these whiskeys is like just really fantastic.
Yeah, the sheer variety of whiskeys that are available out of the 9 distilleries on this island. By the way, did look it up to be clear. The furthest distance between any distillery on this island, as the crow flies, is about 20 miles between Lefroy and Bunnahabhain.
So Lefroy down here in the south,
Yep.
and Bunnahabhain in the
And
north.
Bunnahabhain.
What is this one on the left? Portnahabhain.
Kilcoman?
Portnahabhain?
What are you looking at?
On the bottom left. Oh, it's a city. Sorry.
Oh, Portnahabhain. Yeah, no, that's just a city. Or town, I suppose.
Okay, yeah,
I don't know if there
so
are
so
actual cities on these.
the white words are showing the distilleries, yeah, so.
Yeah, sorry about that.
And we stopped
It's a
reading. We also
very
have
cute
Bamora,
map.
Brooklight, Kilhoman, Bunnahabhain, Kalila. Yeah, I'm not missing any. Ardnaho? Ardnaho's not on here.
So I couldn't
Not yet.
find an up-to-date map. Ardnaho opened up in 2019, and I did not find a map that listed it on on Islay pretty much.
So
It's a
in
very,
theory-
very new distillery relatively.
Yeah, so in
In
theory,
there are 10.
oh, it wasn't 9 including Ardnaho?
It is 9 including Ardnaho.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Port Ellen is on there as a distillery, so there's 9 distilleries, quote unquote, on that
Gotcha.
map right there, but it's counting Port Ellen right there.
Okay.
Yep. So did we
So-
actually talk about our Islay examples for the most different scotches you've had from the same region? I think
We did not, but go for them.
So the most different scotches for me are I struggle to choose between. I think Ardbeg 10, when you freshly crack the bottle, is so different and so medicinal and tarry and swampy compared to any other scotch, any other even heavily peated scotch. It's like the most extreme and, dare I say, unpleasant, although I love it, rendition of peat. And some people try this and love it and chase it forever, and other people try this and decide that Scotch is not for them ever.
Yeah.
And Phill and I are in the former category, and one of the other mods of the Whiskey Lodge is in the opposite end of the category. It took us months to convince
Talking
him.
about Skip?
Yeah, Skip.
Yes.
It took us months
Yeah.
to convince him to try peated whiskey again because he hated Ardbeg that much he wasn't even willing to give it a try. And the thing that convinced him that peat was good was McCarthy's.
Yes.
McCarthy's Oregon Single Malt, which is a heavily peated. It's an Islay style, inspired by Lefroy, if I'm not mistaken, from the story.
I believe so.
Yeah. So McCarthy's Oregon Single Malt is another Islay style, heavily peated to the same spec as Islay, peat malted barley from Baird's on the Highlands, but still an Islay style peat with that heavily peated, lots of phenols. And also, like I was saying before, pairs extra well with a really strong fortified wine like PX. The McCarthy's 6-year PX is my favorite whiskey. Just
It is
favorite whiskey.
Beautiful. Beautiful stuff.
It took me a while to come around to the idea that I could have a favorite whiskey at all, let alone admit to myself that that was the one. But like, when I had that whiskey, I came around a lot faster than I thought I would.
So, because we were talking about what draws you to the style, or to Islay whiskey, my first introduction to single malt Scotch whiskey was Ardbeg 10. That was like the first bottle of Scotch I ever bought myself was a bottle of Ardbeg 10. Funnily enough, this box, but not the bottle within it. Because
That's very fun, actually.
I've been moving the bottle from a new box into this first one over and over again, because I'm weird.
No, it has a significance in your collection, totally.
And if Ardbeg ever changes the box style, it'll just be sort of a fun conversation piece. But I grew up like a little bit of a pyromaniac. Like, I
Really?
taught camp skills at a summer camp, and one of the things that I did was I taught people how to light fires, how to build them correctly, um, and how to cook over a fire. And just sort of constantly being in like wood smoke was just sort of where I would have preferred to live. And then I popped the cork on on Ardbeg 10 for the first time, and it was nothing like that, but so intrinsically linked to burning and fire and warmth. Um, and like I run into this thing where people are like, "Oh yeah, I prefer peated, whiskey in the winter because it's warming," and I associate it so strongly with summer. Though I drink peated malt year round, associate it so strongly with summer because that's when I spend most of my time surrounded by smoke. That it's sort of quintessentially like it gets to be summertime, and I want to have some Ardbeg 10.
Mm.
Since we're going off on what kind of feels a little bit like closing monologues a little bit right here.
Oh, sorry.
Ironically, no, but no, I think
I don't know if we're
an
there.
appropriate thing to do.
I don't.
I don't know.
I don't know if we're there
Yeah,
yet.
but ironically, my first peated Scotch was also Ardbeg. Um, so 3 for 3, I suppose. Mine was Ardbeg Corey Vrecken, though.
Oh wow! So you got
Ooh.
the most powerful of the most powerful distillery.
Yeah. So ironically, I did not think that the smoke was particularly overpowering. It was mainly the burn for the Corey Vrecken.
You know, I have a bottle
Um,
of Core of Reckon, and I haven't tasted it yet. I'm gonna do it
oh,
now.
really? Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
What is the proof
So
on Corey of Reckon?
57, I want to say.
It's up there.
Yeah. Used to be a very good price at right around 100, I think. I think it's increased more recently.
Yeah, Corey of Reckon and Ugadal were sort of the value heavy hitters for a long time because
Ugadal is so good. I really like Ugadal.
not that they were
do we
like
get
a
points
good.
for cracking a bottle on stream?
I think so.
Yeah, sure. We'll call it points. As long as it's a good cork pop.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try my best. I gotta turn off my pop filter on my microphone to get a good cork pop. It's
These
probably gonna
days, I'm
make
actually huge. Yeah,
background noise.
tell us when you're ready. But these days, I'm actually a huge fan of the unsmoked Islay whiskeys. Right now, I'm drinking a little bit of Brookclotty's 2013 Islay Barley, one of my favorite drams for the price if you get it from Costco.
Yeah, that's the caveat. Oh,
Yeah, I don't know how much it is when you're not. All right, ready?
How'd that go?
Oh, that was a good one. Oh, I like that.
yeah. Nice, solid, robust.
Yeah, turning off the noise suppression on the mic makes a lot of noise come through. I wonder how that's gonna sound on the recording. Anyway, yeah.
Doesn't sound too bad, but do. So have you had Corey Vrecken before, or have you
Not once.
not once? All right, this is going to be fascinating then. I'll be interested to see how it holds up to my memory. What does it
I don't
say?
have a
No,
clean
don't read the
glass though.
bottle yet. Oh shoot.
I'll be right back. I'm gonna go get another glass from my cabinet.
Yeah.
While he's doing that, I'm going to pour myself a little bit of Ardbeg 10. I
Do
poured
it.
myself a little bit of Wee Beastie earlier.
Oh, you did find the wee beastie. How was it?
Yeah. I really like it. I think it is one of the more intense Ardbegs.
I think I was telling Doug at some point that my favorite scotches were very young scotches. There is a certain sort of white tea kind of floral, almost chemical note to them in some cases that I really, really enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Not going to lie, I think this, for how relatively new this bottle is, makes a nice pop.
That was a good pop.
Hey Doug, what took you so long? And I also left my face I left my empty spot as the maximum
Oh
size
yeah,
on
you
the
did,
screen.
didn't you?
Oh, it's okay.
No, okay. Well, I'm still yeah, okay. So I just got recently a friend was downsizing their collection of glassware. So I've gotten a lot of distillery branded whiskey glasses of various descriptions here. So
Ah.
I actually do have an Ardbeg tasting glass now, which is significantly smaller than the standard Glencairn. So like last night I was
Oh.
also messing around with like my largest glass and my smallest glass that are both whiskey glasses, which are
Yeah.
over here.
I'm gonna be real with you. I actually significantly prefer smaller copitas to larger Glencairns myself. But right now, today I've been sipping out of a stoneware
Oh.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Glencairn essentially.
So this what I have is like I call it a stem cairn. It's a Schottzwiesel Triton glass, which is like
Yeah.
Glencairn-ish shaped, but it has a stem, and this is like good if like I want to feel a little bit fancy. They're good for wine glasses too, and that sort of thing. This here is this glass shape. Let me see if I can give you a good view of it in the camera. This glass shape like kind of looks like a Glencairn, but doesn't have that sort of knob on the bottom. This is called a spade ram, and this is not a full-size spade ram. This is a mini spade ram. So this is like meant for a half ounce of whiskey. This is like the smallest whiskey glass, the smallest whiskey like designed for whiskey tasting glass. This is like the largest spirits tasting glass that I have. So I compared Springbank 10 in these and a Glencairn and found that the Glencairn gave me the most balance and also highlighted the funky notes of Speyside. I mean, not of wow, of Springbank. Whereas the smallest glass gave me just like a heavy caramel on the nose, and the largest glass kind of muted the whole thing, which is interesting because some whiskeys taste better and smell better in this glass than they do in a Glencairn.
Interesting.
So anyway, there's that, and I figured, I'm gonna get this Ardbeg glass just because, but I'm also gonna compare the Corey of Wrekin in the glass I'm most familiar with, which is the Glencairn. So here with this fresh bottle of Corey of Wrekin, which also, if I'm, I'm not mistaken, I think this is a 2017 bottle. This was
Okay.
same friend. He's downsizing his collection. This was just sitting on his shelf as a backup bottle he never opened. So I said, "Hey, I'll take it.
So this is
I've never tried Corey Wrekin." So
oh gosh, that was what? That wouldn't be no. Yeah, no, that's a good
6
earlier one.
years
Yeah.
ago.
and I also
I
got
don't like
a
thinking about time.
what?
I don't like thinking about time.
Oh
Stop
yeah, no,
making me
yeah,
think
don't
about the
don't
Oh,
don't
passage of
think about
time.
time. All right, this is a much darker color than I was expecting. Something about Ardbeg makes me like think that all the whiskeys that aren't sherried whiskeys are going to be really pale.
Yeah.
what
Because
is the
this is
Corey of Wrekin aged in again?
uh,
Bourbon?
does it
Like
say?
this 10-year-old is like almost totally clear.
Straw almost, yeah.
Yeah, this 10-year-old is really pale. Um, I should keep this bottle on my desk because I'm probably going to be reading from it. By the way, fun thing on the label, they've got a ship going down a little dip in the sort of framing of the label, because the Core of Recon is named after a whirlpool, and that's sort of what's going on with the whole branding on the bottle there. Yeah, like right off the top of
Ex bourbon cask, apparently.
yeah, so this is like sort of a medium amber or like a light amber color, which is like darker than I expect from a hardbag that's not in a sherry cask. Because they don't add color to their whiskeys. But yeah, did you figure it out? Is it ex bourbon? Probably.
Ex bourbon, yeah. Don't read
Oh,
the front of the bottle; it'll tell you tasting notes.
oh no, I'm reading the back of the bottle. To the north of Islay and Jura is the world's second largest whirlpool, the famous Core of Wrekin. Our ancestors knew it as the mother goddess or womb of all creation. Today, this thunderous, seething cauldron is named after the Viking Prince Brecken, okay, who perished there, proving his devotion to the daughter of the Lord of the Isles. Ardbeg, like Core of Reckon, is not for the faint-hearted. I don't know if I would have phrased that last sentence quite that way if I was writing that label, but I get what
Maybe
they're going for.
not, but
So because this is a dusty bottle from 2017, chances are it'll take a little bit to open up in the glass. So probably let's not wait for me to do tasting notes on this. It's kind of
fair
like
enough.
a little closed off at first. Like I don't think I'm quite
I
getting.
should get another. I should get another bottle of that at some point because it was, for a long time, the standard of whiskeys for me when it came to peated whiskeys. My favorite after that was the Bunnahabhain's Kjobanoch, their special edition peated ex-bourbon cask.
Interesting. See, I've got the only sort of special peated whiskeys I have, and I say that, and then I'm like, oh well, I've got the Edward Dollar, I've got the Ardbeg Drum, I've got the Lagavulin Offerman editions. But considering that my love of peat started with Ardbeg 10, I have relatively few Ardbeg bottlings. I've sort of always kept a bottle of Ardbeg on hand, or Ardbeg 10 on hand, and um, I've got a bottle of the Wee Beastie and a bottle of the Drum, and that's it for Ardbeg for me.
I only had the 10 for the longest time and almost finished it. And then I bought the Ardbeg Wee Beastie. I have since finished the 10, but I kept a sample. So that I could compare to things like the Core of Reckon later.
Right.
I have one of everything in their core lineup now, sort of as just an accident.
Really?
Same friend, right? He was a
Oh.
fan of Ardbeg. I ended up getting, so I had the Ardbeg 10 and the Wee Beastie from myself. I ended up getting an Ugadal, a Core of Reckon, both 2017 bottles, and the rest of a bottle of Kelpie that he wasn't a fan of.
Kelpie I'd like to try.
And also
one day.
the rest of a bottle of Anno, the same story, right? Like just wasn't a fan of it. Like he's getting ready to move, so he's downsizing his collection, and that's why like I'm just like, yeah, sure, I'll take him. Like I'll find people to share them with. I've already got an uncomfortable number of bottles of whiskey. What's a dozen more?
What's a dozen more?
Bottles for the bottles rum.
I'm actually slowly running out of whiskey because I have not bought it at all this summer for various reasons. So I need to get more of it at some point.
Can't you just like take it home from the distillery for free?
I mean, well, okay. Let's be completely fair. I have a lot of Del Bach. Like I'm not even close to running out of Del Bach.
What you saying that's not whiskey? It just hits different, you know. It's American single malt.
It just hits different.
It's not whiskey.
I actually tried Del Bach for the first time in like a week or two today, and it's good.
How do you go into your place of work day in and day out and not end up tasting any? When I visited Westward,
claiming you're almost out of whiskey.
I was claiming I'm almost out of whiskey. Yeah.
Someone's about to be taken to task.
My partner just popped in the room to tell me that was a fucking bullshit lie.
Walls full of whiskey.
I was trying to gently tell you you were wrong.
Yeah. That's fair.
If it makes them feel any better, you are currently talking to someone who has 187 bottles of whiskey and 11 bottles of rum.
Yeah, what did I say my count was?
200 and something.
Just over 200.
Yeah, no, your count was at like over 200, yeah.
It's like 205? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I have 207 in my spreadsheet, 2 of which are rums from Balcones. So I have 205 whiskeys.
Yeah, you can't say that.
I can't.
Now we're all holding each other to task on how much whiskey we.
I just told my partner Doug has over 200 bottles of whiskey, and my partner said, "Yeah, but those are grown ass men."
Are we though?
I think that's the first time I've been called an adult.
Oh.
But I mean,
yeah, this is good. I've long ago read a review of this by a friend's favorite author who is also I can't remember the name of the author, but who is also a whiskey fan.
Yeah, I'm gonna have.
And
So.
he did like this whole
I
bracket,
need more flavors.
and ended up it came down to Core of Reckon and some unpeated whiskey, I don't remember, and I think the other one won. But what he said about the Core of Reckon is that, like, is it pleasant? No. Is it amazing? Yes.
She did it.
Which is like a
Yeah.
really great
So-
way of putting Ardbeg.
So sort of a friend's comment to me, who unfortunately couldn't make it to watch the stream this time. After I handed him a glass of Ardbeg, having consumed a glass myself, thoroughly enjoying myself, asked me why I hated myself.
Yep, that's the first time I opened the bottle of Ardbeg 10, which was, so my history, right? I guess we were asking, like, what draws you to the region. We started talking about what was our first bottle of whiskey, our first bottle of Scotch. For me, my first bottle of Scotch was Glenfiddich 12. My first peated Scotch was Ardbeg 10. Glenfiddich 12 was the first bottle I bought for myself. I had a bottle of Macallan 15, which was a gift. But yeah, the first bottle of Scotch that I bought for myself was Glenfiddich 12. The first bottle of peated Scotch I got was Ardbeg 10, because I figured people say peat is polarizing. If I want to find out if I like peat, I should go all the way. And Ardbeg was the thing that I had been told was like the relatively accessible going all the way into the deep end of peat without spending $300 sight unseen.
Yes.
Do you know, like, you could buy Octomore, the most peaty whiskey
You
in
can buy
the world.
Octomore. If you can find Octomore,
If you can
buy
find it and you can afford it, because it's like $250, $300.
I've never seen a real life bottle of Octomore.
I have seen
You gotta
it
come visit
in
me, man.
person.
Yeah,
It
right?
glowed like the Grail from on high, and it was priced at $399.99 because I live in Virginia.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I saw a bottle of Octomore 10 year, 3rd edition, I think. And it was like $350. And in retrospect, I kind of wish I bought it, because that actually is one of my favorite Octomores. I tried it via a friend. It's so good. I wish I had bought it. That said, yeah, when I first opened Ardbeg 10, my wife said it tasted, it smelled like her face cream, like her acne face cream.
That makes sense.
And I kind of don't agree. I mean, so I don't disagree with that. It's kind of an accurate, like, but like for me, I don't have any negative associations with that smell. It just smells cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll have to write a review of it and try to get you guys to guess which one is about the face cream and which one is about the Ardbeg.
You probably shouldn't drink face cream.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do it.
You
Smell
you
it,
put it on
maybe?
your face. It's probably safe.
Yeah, Core of Reckon's really good. I want to write a review of it, but like I've got like 100
So many
things.
to write a-
Yeah,
to
I've
write
got
reviews
100
on.
things I want to write a review about, and like writing a review of a bottle from 6 years ago, like, it's not. I want to prioritize more recent releases that I have while they're still in any way relevant, and then I'll get into my backlog of older things.
Give it a sec, Doug. I think Phill is having a religious moment right now.
I'm trying to decide what it is that I've consumed this evening prior to this that made me exhale after taking a sip of Ardbeg 10 and get a strong taste of the way menthol cigarette smoke smells.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
I have gotten that note from Ardbeg before, so I relate.
Okay.
I relate to that.
Also want to be clear. We have been talking about smoky whiskeys for so long, and that Virginia, what do they call it? Like a cured whiskey or something like that. It's over
Oh.
behind Phill right there. Has been staring at me this entire time. This is a funny one to me because this is a whiskey that I love. I really like this whiskey, and if I remember correctly, Phill, you don't agree with me on that.
We're not
I
even pretending to
dislike
stay
this-
on topic anymore.
No,
I dislike this very much because
I'll take it off you.
it is weird. Like, there are elements of it that I do enjoy.
Oh, the
that's fun.
Merlarky. Yeah, I
Yeah.
also am
Yeah.
looking forward to being challenged by this whiskey.
It tastes like you're drinking like bacon or brown sugar bacon or something like that. It's bizarre.
And like, I may or may not have had a whole conversation with somebody relatively high up in the company, not knowing who it was, at a bar where he was friends with the bar manager.
And you insulted the whiskey?
I did not insult the whiskey. I said that
You insulted him.
probably a little bit.
Whatever Yahoo made this whiskey doesn't know what the hell they're doing.
Well, I think I said something along the lines of, there is a lot of room for this stuff to grow, and I think being in a barrel for longer to knock the edges off will make it into a really amazing whiskey. But right now, it's got too many off notes from impurities that the barrel will catch. And he disagreed, but he was like, I think that's getting, the profile that we want from our new make. And we haven't had time, or there hasn't been enough time to really age it. And I probably should have figured out who I was talking to at that point. It's like, I think that they should knock it off with the, flavors like the lemon flavored whiskey and the cinnamon flavored whiskey, and focus on really crafting a product that can stand toe to toe with, other whiskeys that are aged, because I think that's where their spirit will shine, because it's just got too many petroleum off notes as a relatively young new make with flavor added. There since
Sorry. Repeat the last sentence because I accidentally joined the call on the other Discord app.
oops. Basically, I told him that I thought that his new make was full of too many off notes to be good for a flavored base or for a gin. And I'm pretty sure he ignored me, and it's probably good that he did, because
you're the
at
Yahoo
time,
that doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't have any credentials. All I know is that I know what I like, and this, I don't like this, and I really do think that it's because it hasn't had enough time in a barrel to really knock some of the.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Hey, by the way, Ian, just so you know, I muted you because it sounded like you were having a conversation. So you might need to unmute yourself when you come back. Just FYI. And let me know if you can't do that, because I might have overridden your ability to unmute yourself.
I can hear him.
What?
I can hear Ian.
Oh, then I guess I just muted it for the purposes of the stream, in which case, let me know when you're back. Or Phil, let me know when he's back.
I can hear. Excellent.
Okay, so
So what did your cat eat?
I did mute him, though. Is he coming back? Is he back? Sorry, this was not meant to be a thing. No, like, should I unmute him? I'm gonna unmute him. Phil, I was waiting for you to tell me whether I should unmute him because I was taking his voice off the stream.
Oh, I was misunderstanding. I was trying to figure out, like, if there was something wrong with his audio, and I was desperately trying to figure out, like, is there somehow that I'm hearing his voice much clearer than you?
Yes,
yeah.
because I muted him on my end.
Yeah, no, I kept telling, every time you said that, I kept telling Phil, yes, I want to be unmuted. Unmute me now. No, I'm so sorry about that. Two things happened at the same time.
Are you in trouble?
Yeah. No, I'm not in trouble. Two things happened. First of all, my headphones started telling me that they're running out of batteries, and second, the cat got into all of the catnip, and it is now all gone.
Oh,
Oh.
shit.
Oh.
Okay, your cat's gonna have
Are
a
you gonna
fun
have to
night.
Yeah.
take your cat to the methadone clinic?
Apparently, I might take my cat to rehab. Is what I might take him to.
Hey, we still have a region.
Oh
We do
yeah,
still
we
have
do.
one more.
Campbeltown.
The little one.
The little one.
It's the only one that I don't have a whiskey from.
David is still
I
here.
have.
David said cats, am I
David.
right?
Yeah, I can't believe you're still here, David. That's amazing, dude.
Thank you for hanging out
So,
for
yeah,
3
no,
hours.
Yeah, Campbelltown. It's got 3 distilleries. Glen Scotia, Glen Gyle, and Springbank. It's really hard, as Doug said hours ago now, it's really hard to tell if it actually has a sort of regional variation or if it itself is just the way that it is. So I suppose the distilleries are the way that they are. There's some good stuff. I've got some Long Row from Springbank right here.
Naturally, I
I've
have
got
to
some
flex that I have
Kilkerran.
Springbank, but you also have Springbank. Good for you. Yeah. I have
Hey.
Kilkerran. It's in my top shelf across the room. I also have Glen Scotia is Campbelltown. That's behind me there also.
Yeah, so it used to have 30 distilleries. It now has a tenth of that. People are trying to revive the area, but the distilleries that are there are quite good, but you're also paying for quite a premium, quite honestly, right there.
Oh, I missed the bottle opener. The bottle pop.
Ah, shoot.
Okay.
Ooh.
Nice. What are you having, Phil?
I was just making a cork pop sound, but I think I'm gonna actually pour myself more Daluin.
Nice. Do you have any Campbelltowns?
I do not. It's the only region I don't have representation from.
If I'm not mistaken, I have all 3. I don't have any I don't have okay,
Glengyle.
so Glengyle is Kilkerran. Kilkerran is
Okay.
made by Glengyle.
There's a
And
lot of different brands coming out of Campbelltown, which makes this way more complicated.
yeah, I think it's just that Kilkerran was like already a distillery name in a closed distillery and they couldn't get the rights to it or something like that. So they called it Glengyle Distillery and they released the product, or maybe it was Glengyle was already a product, like a blended whiskey product or something like that. So they gave it another. So Kilkerran is the name of Campbelltown from antiquity. And it's like it's an anglicized version. So Kilkerran is spelled in like a nice easy to say way, but like the name in Gaelic is like really hard to read if you don't know how it's pronounced. It's like lots of CHs and like extra vowels and stuff like you'd expect. Yeah, David, we are actually, so we're working on a bit where opening the bottles right in front of the mic is going to become a supercut later. Yeah. You can make some good whiskey ASMR with uncorking and pouring sounds. That's pretty much what we're aiming at.
Yeah.
All right, so the name Kilkerran comes from the Scottish Gaelic Cain Loch Kilkerran, head of the lake of St. Kieran's Cell.
All right.
Huh?
By the way, that Lafroig 20 I poured and then promptly forgot about because I got excited about Core of Reckon.
Sure.
It smells super sweet next to the ultra smoky Core of Reckon.
I've always found that you said it was Lagavulin 20?
Lafroig 20, the SMWS.
Lafroig, really? Okay, I've always found that Lagavulin's very sweet. Lafroig's not as much. That's fascinating. But yeah, the Corey Brecken.
Lafroig, when it gets older, like Lafroig regularly has a 25-year-old OB. And Lafroig that is like, Lafroig themselves feel that Lafroig has 2 sweet spots. There's the sweet spot that's around the 10-year-old that has that really intense smokiness and the sort of
That
Band-Aid flavor.
Medicinal.
Yeah. So that's a whole character of Lafroig. And then it goes through this transition in the teens where it doesn't really have a particular character and doesn't quite know what it wants to be. And then it comes out the other side in the early to mid 20s, and it is a completely different whiskey that has its own distinct character. That's what they say about their whiskey. So it's like
It's
Lefroy,
a good way to think
that
about it.
smoke comes way down in the mix, and the medicinal is sometimes there, sometimes not, depending on the bottling. This one doesn't have it. The reason that I got this bottle was from a friend who didn't like it because it didn't have the Lefroy Band-Aid note, which he loves. So he's like, yeah, I don't really care for it. You can have it, basically. It's nice to have friends who just give you things.
Yeah, it
so
is. I imagine so.
To be fair, I had to work
I
for it, because the theme of that night was build a flight around his bottles that he doesn't want anymore, and then he'll give you the bottle. So I built some kind of a PD whiskey flight and then got the...
so
Not all the peated whiskeys.
Well, this one was from one. Yeah, I got several. This one was one of them. The Springbank 10 also was from that same thing. I just matched it up with my Kilkerran. Like, here's a
in
Campbeltown. You have a Campbeltown flight. We did it.
I think it was in 2018, maybe 2017, somewhere around in there. Lefroy released a 30-year-old single malt that was in partnership with, I want to say, Purdy, Purdy. And they sold it in a special case to go into the back of your Range Rover that also held your bespoke Purdy bird hunting shotgun.
Wow,
And it was several thousand Great British pounds.
that makes sense.
Yeah, so known for its funky maritime notes. People will say the Campbeltown funk a lot. That's what you hear.
Yes.
Yeah, they do say that.
And my takeaway from the Campbeltown funk is that it's the Springbank funk.
Yeah, pretty much.
Because really, Glen Scotia doesn't so much have it, and I haven't quite figured out what Glen Scotia's character is yet.
I also feel that Kilkerran has a very clean sort of sweet note to it.
Kilkerran smells like kiwis to me.
Kiwis.
And
okay.
also it has a little bit of this gasoline sort of thing going on, and like it does have a kind of funk, but it's not the same as the Springbank funk. An interesting thing to note, Glengyle Distillery, which makes Kilkerran, is operated by some of the same people that operate Springbank. So Springbank and Kilkerran almost can't be said to be different styles, if they have the same style. Let me rephrase. If they, to the extent that they have the same or similar styles, it is important to remember that it is the same or similar people making the whiskey.
If I remember the possibly apocryphal story correctly, at one point, one or the other was looking like it might fold. And in order to keep the designation of Campbeltown as an official region of Scotch whiskey, elements of the other two distilleries came together to keep the third up and going.
Ah. So that could be what Kilkerran is then. The Glengyle Distillery.
I could be wrong, but I've heard a story to that effect.
Yeah, so as for why Campbeltown is so hard to come by, I didn't look up volume numbers, but there are only 3 distilleries, and Kilkerran is only being operated part-time. So it's kind of 2.5 distilleries. And even at that, they don't have a huge amount of output. They don't historically get used in blends that much. Single malts weren't really popular until the late 90s, I think. Or maybe early 2000s. So like
not super popular.
So that's basically like there are reasons that all these distilleries closed, and like maybe they weren't good. It's the same way that like we don't know if a lot of those lowland distilleries were any good. There's people. Paolo in the Whiskey Lodge is a big fan of. Somehow he has a way of getting his hands on samples of old, closed,
Very
like
old.
yeah, like stuff from the
Not-
60s that's been aged 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, and then sat in bottles for 20 or 30 years. Like amazing stuff.
Yeah, like the
Um,
specs, by the specs, amazing. Some of it really good. Some of it, there's a reason this whiskey distillery didn't survive.
yeah. Sort of my comment earlier about the almost unpalatable industrial nature of old Port Allen is basically directly from him going, yeah. So I know that like you really want to try a Port Ellen, and you can do that, I guess. But here's why Port Ellen closed.
You know,
Um,
industrial is kind of a fun note, and my recommendation if you really want industrial funk, try aged rum.
yeah.
Because I think
Yeah, definitely try aged rum.
everything that I've gotten from a Campbeltown that I would call funky, I have also gotten from a rum. And like to be
For
fair,
probably a quarter of the price.
yeah, to be fair though, like that's if the only thing you want from your spirit is the funkiness, then like yeah, like go get something
Yeah.
that's known to be funky. If what you want is whiskey with a bit of funk, maybe try rum cask whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
So like
Or
the
drink
point
rum.
mostly being there's alternatives to Campbelltown whiskeys, and Springbank in particular is extremely hard to find now for the same reason that Buffalo Trace products and bourbon are so hard to find, because somehow it got into the zeitgeist that Springbank is this absolutely fantastic and irreplaceable whiskey and you have to have it. So everybody went out and bought it, and now you can't buy it anymore, right? Or you can only find it for super expensive.
Like there's a store in DC that I regularly get emails from that currently have Springbank 15 for $800 a bottle.
Yeah.
The Springbank 10, I think I saw it at the store also. $110? Like
Which is really high for a 10-year-old.
it's high for a
single malt.
10-year-old. But it's not like abusively high.
Yeah.
I don't know. I still don't know if I would have bought it. I'm happy to have it, but I don't know that I would have bought it for that.
Yeah.
The same way that I would no longer buy Yamazaki when it costs $220, $250. Yamazaki 12.
Yeah.
Like when I bought it at 130, I felt like I was being extorted because the first time I bought Yamazaki 12 was in Japan and it cost the equivalent of $50. Like 6,500 yen.
Yeah.
Like 130 is like I'm going to buy it now because I will not buy it if it costs more than that, was kind of my line of thinking. And so I stashed a bottle.
I think we should do a whole episode on overhyped whiskeys.
Yeah, that's clickbait.
Yeah,
That is
there is.
clickbait.
Well, yeah, but there's like a whole category of things. Japanese whiskey, a combination of a couple of famous people stating that they really like it, and Suntory very judiciously limiting the supply of their whiskey to places outside of Japan, made it extremely popular and sought after and expensive. Springbank for the whiskey nerd quintessentialism. Buffalo Trace because of Pappygate primarily.
Sorry, I need to unpack that statement. Whiskey nerd quintessentialism.
Yeah. Springbank is considered a quintessential Campbelltown whiskey, irreplaceable, and something that everyone should try, and therefore everyone tried to get their hands on it. Whiskey nerds primarily.
Right. Kind of the same thing that's happening with chartreuse right now. If you like chartreuse or you want to try chartreuse, you got to buy it because you're not going to be able to anymore because they just announced they're not making anymore to meet demand because they're monks and they're not after profit.
Yeah.
Like the reason makes sense. They're not trying to profit from manufactured scarcity, but the rest of the world is like, oh shoot, if we don't buy our chartreuse now, there's not going to be any. Same thing happened with Springbank, basically. And especially the older Springbank, because these days there's so much demand for any Springbank at all. They're just selling it all as the watered down 46. I mean, it's not too bad, 46%, but like not cask strength. I saw once a Springbank 12 cask strength.
I saw one, yeah.
Springbank 12 cask strength I saw once on an online store where I was already placing an order, and I don't know what my reasoning was, but I decided not. This was like that would have been like my 12th bottle of whiskey, right? So I was like, do I really want to spend $150 on a Springbank 12? And I've been told it's funky and you might not like it. I missed out
I'm
because you can't buy
I'm
it for that
about
anymore.
I'm about to do that thing again where I tell a story about being in a liquor store looking at a shelf and like looking back and going, "Oh, I know what those were. Damn, I should have gotten those." There's a little store in DC that has lots of pretty good stuff. They had a whole shelf with Springbank and Kilkerran and Glen Scotia and mixed in with like Islay Scotch. And I remember looking at a Kilkerran 9-year-old heavily peated and going, "Oh, that looks really interesting. I like peated Scotch." Looked at the price tag that was like $99.99 and went, "Oh, that's a bit much for me."
I'd buy it for that.
Um, yeah,
That's what I bought mine
Karen
for.
12 is really good.
I should have just gotten it. I should have been like, yeah, I've got an extra $100. But hindsight is 2020. It was a distillery I wasn't familiar with, and while I like heavily peated, at the time splashing out $100 on a whiskey from a distillery that I had never heard of just didn't seem like a good idea, you
Oh
know.
yeah, if you'd never heard of it,
And so
yeah,
I didn't.
completely, yeah.
And again, yeah, because that was real early in my whiskey journey. It was like when I was starting to discover that, oh, I should go into DC and look for stuff in DC that I can't get in Virginia based on recommendations online. And then I, hit that one store in DC. Well, actually, I hit a couple and went, yeah, I don't see any of the brands that I was looking for, and all these prices are really high. Uh, and in retrospect, no, they weren't. No, they weren't. I was just a dumb broke kid.
Yeah, it's like trying to time the market. It's not gonna work. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, like I hate that this is the advice, but there are just like, okay. I hate that this is the advice, but whiskey's only gonna get more expensive. So if there's something that you're thinking about, you might want it,
Yeah.
and you're like
Just do it.
more than a maybe on it. If it's a question of now versus later, buy it now if you can afford it, because with the way that the pandemic shifted things, the prices of whiskeys that haven't gone up
Hmm.
yet are living on borrowed time. So like, especially if you see something for the same price or close to the same price it was 2-3 years ago, very soon it's going to be a lot more expensive. Like that's the advice. So if like now is the time
Yeah.
to go find the good deals, and the good deals are the things that haven't gone up yet, because they will. Yeah. Now, don't if you can't find it on a store shelf for what looks like a reasonable price given what's around it and the specs, and like always do your research. Sadly,
Yeah.
Scotch whiskey is a place where you kind of
Hmm.
need to do your research still, because and sometimes that means going to a bar and trying something, right? But just like, if you don't know that you're going to like a Scotch, you have to be
Hmm.
willing to have lost the $60 it costs to try it, or the $80 it costs to try it, or the $100 it costs to try it. But if you know that you like something, and you've done your research, and you know that this other thing has similarities to that thing you liked, you can use that as a way to jump from whiskey to whiskey that you're going to enjoy, and not feel bad about potentially spending that money now instead of later. But then you also end up in this situation where you've got 200 bottles, 150 of which you never touch.
It takes a lot to end up in your position, I'll be fair,
Yeah.
Doug.
It does take a lot. But it also takes surprisingly little. Like, you just say, like, 3 years ago I said I would spend a certain budget a month on whiskey, and it wasn't.
I'm only going to have one handful of dirt.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to have the other. You've got to have the other hand to stabilize yourself while you're digging it out of the ground.
I mean, I will be totally honest. Like, I want to say 3-4 years ago, if you told me that I would be that one weird dude who's like, ah, yeah, I got to get this new Catoctin Creek release. I've got literally almost everything else they've produced over the last 5 years. I just gotta go get this and see how it's different. Um, I probably would have called you crazy. and yet here I am with 12 bottles of Catoctin Creek.
You know, for what it's worth,
They're all different.
I
They're
don't
not
own
the
any
same.
bottles of Catoctin Creek, but the one I tried blew me away. So I understand your position.
It is so good.
Like if that's the rye that is available to you
also-
on a regular basis, I could see why you fall in love with rye. Like if the rye that's available to you on a regular basis is bullet rye, like in my case, maybe you can see why I didn't exactly fall in love with rye.
Yeah, yeah. For those of you who are watching and or listening, Catoctin Creek is a small distillery in Purcellville, Virginia. They produce 100% rye whiskey that is phenomenal. It's got a little bit of funk. It's got oodles of baking spice and rye character, and it is hands down the best rye whiskey being made today, in my personal humble opinion, or not so humble.
That reminds me. Hey, check out Phil's Twitter. Because there's still the Virginia Whiskey Tournament going on. Theoretically.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't even know if I've seen Catoctin Creek. Yeah, there you go.
There's so many distilleries.
They won
They won handily.
Yeah, last year they were one of the final four. This year is shaping up similarly. Unfortunately, I've been having less voting this year for a great number of reasons that I won't get into.
Could have something to do with this
I'm
single
to the
letter
end.
logo that is up that you can't see because
Yeah.
of the way I've cropped the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could have something to do
Yeah.
with that. Maybe.
Could have something to do with that. Entirely possible.
Possibly. But
Maybe we'll figure out how to
Alright.
run polls on
yeah,
there's a couple more slides here.
Yeah.
Those slides are not necessarily
Yes,
involved.
let's go ahead and-
Yeah.
Maybe we should just like table that. What's this about?
Yeah, this one is a
fluid.
kind of long explanation.
Oh
and
yeah,
this was
we've been
this
tasting.
is the
whole
in
time,
progress
yeah.
whiskey tasting thing that
yeah.
I was making.
All right, so what other questions did we have ready to guide the conversation that we didn't answer yet? Not that I want to get us into a whole thing, but like
The last question that that I remember was someone said, and I quote, "So using Scotch whiskey in a cocktail must be some sort of sin, right?"
not at all. But
right,
I don't have
yeah.
any good cocktail specs for
No.
Scotch, to be honest.
There's a lot of it's harder to use in a cocktail than things like
penicillin.
bourbon
Yeah,
or
Yeah.
rye.
peated, like heavily peated whiskey
Um,
seems to have a good place as an
Rob Roy.
accent in cocktails. So the penicillin usually do a
Yes.
smoky float. You get like Lafroig or Ardbeg, the really heavy smoke.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. A Rob Roy is a Manhattan, but you make it with single malt instead of rye, right?
Blended Scotch.
More like blended. Okay, blended Scotch.
Or a blended Scotch is what I see most frequently.
Okay.
It
It sounds good in theory, but I don't know if I've ever had it.
Best Rob Roy. The best Rob Roy I've ever had was made with I want to say the Glenfiddich 15-year-old.
Mm.
But that was at a friend's house, and he was making cocktails that were hey, what do you feel like drinking? And I, as a joke, said, oh, I'll just have Scotch. So he made me a Rob Roy with Glenfiddich 15 because that was the only Scotch he had.
Hey,
And it was
it's a good Scotch.
pretty good.
This is back to our earlier point
It
from
is.
past episodes.
I mean, there's
Yeah.
if you have a cocktail and you upgrade your spirits, it's going to be a better cocktail.
Yeah, if you have a chance to make the best like Rob Roy that you've ever had in your life, then you should just do that. Like you can get as much enjoyment as you want out of a bottle of an Octomore Rob Roy. You can get as much enjoyment as you want out of a bottle of wonderful, wonderful Scotch. I don't know if I would use Octomore for a Rob Roy myself.
Yeah, like it'd make a really good Rob Roy, but is it
wouldn't,
better
but-
than just drinking the whiskey neat?
That is the question. I don't think you ever know until you
Yeah.
use it in a Rob Roy.
Oh, you enabler.
Yeah. I mean, but I mean, there's also the whole to steal a joke from a friend, better ingredients, better cars,
Oh, I thought you were gonna
um,
say better ingredients, better pizza.
which was yes. Um,
Not sponsored. So I
there
won't
Not
say the
was,
name of
sponsored.
I
that
believe it
brand.
was
I
Daihatsu.
don't even remember which pizza
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah. I want to say it was Daihatsu or maybe it was Mitsubishi. One of the Japanese automotive manufacturers had a little ad run in the 80s, and there used to be like a poster for it in my friend's garage. Um, that was, we're built from better parts, and at the bottom it was so we make better cars, and it was a reference to superior, manufacturing techniques. Um, but we were having pizza one time, and he just looked at that brand's pizza box and said, "Better ingredients, better car." And that just sort of stuck with me as being just a great. Every joke is an inside joke,
Right. Of
and I
course.
don't know what a normal joke is because they're all inside jokes. But better ingredients, better car has become shorthand for use better stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so
Like,
there's
you,
a question
you
in
want
here.
a good guitar?
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry. I think we finally hit the part of the night where Phill has slightly desynced audio, and that's amazing because we made it 3 hours before
It's
that started
amazing that we made
happening.
it this long,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
And sorry about that, Phill, if it feels like we're interrupting you
yeah,
a lot. um so
it's okay.
there's a good question in here that feels like a good place to wrap up. And this is kind of the question we've been dancing around this whole time. So Scotch is from Scotland, but what are all these subsectors of Scotland, and do these hyper-specific localities make a difference, and if so, how? Right, now that we've kind of given you the tour of Scotland regions and we've talked about like the ways in which they're different and the ways in which they're not, like in some ways that question, like it's almost like I paid someone to ask that question, because that was sort of the whole point of today's show. Um, Ultimately, there are differences, but it has more to do with how old a distillery is and how much contact they had with nearby distilleries in terms of having a shared regional style. These days, if you made a distillery, this seems to be happening more often, and we're going to see a lot of this in American single malt, I think. Um, if you make a new single malt distillery these days, you would use the techniques that make the most sense to you to create the art you want to create, right? And whiskey, single malt whiskey especially, is considered an art, especially in Scotland. And I feel that way about American single malt too, because it's mostly craft whiskey in the United States. So all the decisions that they're making are sort of independent of regional style, but one way. So we talked about terroir. How much does terroir exist in the whiskey? You have to think about like what adds the flavor to whiskey. So you've got the grain, the choice of distillation style, the choice of barrels, and how long you age it. The things that are closer to the bottle are probably going to have the most impact, just because they've eclipsed other flavors, or the distillation process hid certain nuances of the grain and the yeast and the fermentation time and stuff. You can't create good flavors from bad flavors, but you can get rid of some bad flavors, and you can enhance good flavors. uh the aging, I think, is the most significant factor that's going to have to do with where whiskeys are. And so latitude and weather conditions probably are the most significant influence on a whiskey, like altitude and latitude, and just like the things that affect climate of a region. So like it makes sense that you've got the Lowlands and the Highlands and the Islands all kind of being their own separate thing, and Speyside being this hyper specific. Speyside is really the style, like the shared style area. And then everything else is like either they were super isolated, like Islay is really isolated. There's a reason it's not just an island whiskey. It has its own distinct style, so isolated there. And Campbeltown, pretty isolated, right? That's like it's a town at the end of a peninsula that would take a long time to get to from, say, the Lowlands or from Speyside. Like pretty isolated. So the answer is yes and no. Does the region make a difference? It's more sometimes the actual place has something to do with it. Sometimes the history or the affiliations with other distilleries had something to do with it. But overall, everything is a choice. And the styles that come out of a distillery are the result of those choices.
We have effectively taken the thing that we set out to do, a simple and easy to explain Scotch Whiskey 101, and decided to overcomplicate it into a 3-hour stream in which we do not answer the base question in a meaningful sense. But I think that that's a great way to explain it overall, yeah.
There's a reason we didn't call this stream Scotch
don't think
101.
there is an easy explanation for it.
There truly isn't, yeah.
It would be easy if the answer was yes.
It would be great if the answer is yes. We have chosen to say no.
It might even be easy if the answer was no.
Oh, you're right. It might be, yeah.
But like less, because if the answer is no, that means there's a lot more distinct distillery styles to learn. And if the answer is maybe or sometimes, then it's both more complicated and thankfully more simple, right? You can more or less know what you're getting from broad strokes from an Islay or from a Speyside. And to a lesser extent, broad strokes, you know what to expect from a Highlands or an Island whiskey or a Lowlands whiskey. But there's a lot more variation outside of the broad strokes commonalities. So that's the maybe and the yes or the no. And yeah, you're right. It's not a simple answer, and that's exactly why we're such geeks about this stuff. Like there's so much to learn. There's so like this is a hobby that's full of trivia. Like every bottle is full of trivia just in how it tastes, let alone everything else about it. Like everything else around it, like the history of the distillery and like what the label says about it and how they actually made it and what considerations went into it, or did they just say, hey, we have something that tastes good, we were trying to do something else and we ended up accidentally making this other thing sometimes, so we made that a release, right? Or we tried an experiment and we came up with something that's like way different, like Balvenie Week of Peat, right? Balvenie is not known for smoky whiskey, right? They're known for it's a Speyside with usually a heavily sherried style, but not like a full sherry, not a sherry bomb, but like malt and sherry in a nice balance. And then once a year, they distill peated whiskey and they release that, and it's totally different. Basically an experiment, but it's a beloved experiment. And so like the other thing is, you could try every distillery that exists in the world, but it's virtually impossible to try every release from every distillery in the world. No matter how hard you try, and trust me, I've been trying. At some point, it becomes collecting Pokemon, where there is a never-ending increase to the number of Pokemon available to collect. And you just have to make peace with the fact that you aren't going to try everything. And that's okay.
What do you mean there are 1,000 Pokemon now?
What do you mean there are 1,000 distilleries making 5 different releases a year that are all different from each other every year? Except the actual answer is probably more like there's probably like 3,000 single malt distilleries in the world.
Holy shit, there are more than 1,000 Pokemon. What the hell?
We're back on Pokemon now, for real. Gary Oak.
Gary Oak.
Oh no, having flashbacks.
It's starting again. Guys, I think we've gone full on into silly now.
Oh yes.
Might be time to call it.
Yeah.
It has been a pleasure. This went a lot better than trying to teach the audience from a 101 perspective. I am going to go spend the rest of my evening enjoying this Core of Reckon and deciding what I think of it, but it is quite good. What do you have, Ian? Because I can't see that we're going to cheers with.
I am sipping on a bit of Long Row Peated right now.
Nice. Good choice. Well, all right, gentlemen. And thanks to the audience for bearing with us. We still have, I think David is still watching.
That's wild, David. I can't believe you would do that.
And thank you so much. Thanks for bearing with us. We're signing off for now. We'll see you Thursday. Until then, we'll see you in the lodge. Sláinte.
Sláinte. David, I can't believe you've done this.